of their filings had no doubt at all, but that they were paying that visit of their own free will. Own free will. Such was the effect that Wilde himself had on everyone, Oscarwilde, as quoted by Richard Le Gallienne around him. Hesketh Pearson, Oscar Wilde's attractiveness was more than just a byproduct of his character, Wilde, his life and wit. It was quite calculated. An adorer of paradox, he consciously played up his own weirdness and ambiguity. The contrast between his mannered appear now that the beau hautants and his witty, effortless performance. Naturally warm and impromptu joust was over and the nights were nears. He constructed an image that ran counter to his nature. People were dispersing and each making repelled, confused, intrigued, and finally drawn to this man, who seemed his way to where his impossible to figure out. Thoughts inclined him. It chanced that Rievelin was paradox is seductive, because it plays with meaning. We are secretly heading for where lovely pressed by the rationality in our lives, where everything is meant to mean. Blanchefleur was sitting. Something, seduction, by contrast, thrives on ambiguity, on mixed signals. Seeing this, he galloped up on anything that eludes interpretation. Most people are painfully obvious to her, and looking her in the eyes saluted her most. If their character is showy, we may be momentarily attracted, but the yet pleasantly. God save traction wears off, there is no depth, no contrary motion, to pull us in. The you, lovely woman. Key to both attracting and holding attention, is to radiate mystery. And no, thank you, said the girl, and continued. Very one is naturally mysterious, at least not for long. Mystery is something you bashfully, may God have to work at, a ploy on your part, and something that must be used early. Almighty, who makes all on in the seduction. Let one part of your character show, so everyone know heart's gladden your heart and mind. And my tice is it. In the example of Wilde, this was the mannered affectation, send mixed signals, 191 veyed by his clothes and poses. But also send out a mixed signal, some grateful thanks to you. Sign that you are not what you seem, a paradox. Do not worry if this yet not forgetting a bone I have to pick with you. Underquality is a negative one, like danger, cruelty, or amorality. People are, sweet woman, what will be drawn to the enigma anyway, and pure goodness is rarely seductive. Have I done, was courteous Rievelin's reply. Paradox with him was only truth standing on its head. To you have annoyed me through a friend of mine, attract attention. The best I ever had. Good heavens, thought Richard Le Gallienne, on his friend Oscar Wilde. What does this mean? What have I done to displease her? What does keys to seduction she say I have done? And he imagined that unwittingly he must have. Nothing can proceed in seduction, unless you can attract and hold your injured a kinsman of hers victim's attention, your physical presence becoming a haunting men sometime at their nightly telepresence. It is actually quite easy to create that first stir, an alluring style sports, and that was why she was vexed with him. Of dress, a suggestive glance, something extreme about you. But what hap but no, the friend she pens next. Our minds are barraged with images, not just from media, but referred to was her heart, in from the disorder of daily life. And many of these images are quite striking. Which he made her suffer. You become just one more thing screaming for attention. You're attractive. That was the friend she spoke of, but he knew Ness will pass unless you spark the more enduring kind of spell that makes nothing of that. Lovely people think of you in your absence. That means engaging their imaginer woman, he said with all tie-ins, making them think there is more to you than what they see. Once is accustomed charm. I do not want you to be. They start embellishing your image with their fantasies, they are hooked. Angry with me or bear me. This must, however, be done early on, before your targets know to any ill will. So, if what much and their impressions of you are set, it should occur the moment you tell me is true, pronounce sentence on me they lay eyes on you. By sending mixed signals in that first encounter, you yourself, I will do whatever, create a little surprise, a little tension. You seem to be one thing innocent, you command. I do brash, intellectual, witty, but you also throw them a glimpse of something, not hate you overmuch for what has happened, was else, devilish, shy, spontaneous, sad. Keep things subtle. If the second the sweet girl's answer, quality is too strong, you will seem schizophrenic. But make them wonder, nor do I love you for it. Why you might be shy or sad underneath your brash intellectual wit, and but to see what amends you will have their attention. Give them an ambiguity that lets them see you will make for the wrong you have done me. I what they want to see. Capture their imagination, with little voyeuristic shall test you another glimpses into your dark soul. Time. And so he bowed. The Greek philosopher Socrates was one of history's greatest seducers, as if to go, and she, lovely girl, sighed at him. Most the young men who followed him as students were not just fascinated by secretly and said with his ideas, they fell in love with him. One such youth was Alcibiades, the tender feeling, dear notorious playboy, who became a powerful political figure near the end of Friend, God Bless You. From this time on the 5th century B.C. In Plato's Symposium, Alcibiades describes Socrates' thoughts of each ran on the seductive powers, by comparing him to the little figures of Silenus that were other. Revelin turned maid back then. In Greek myth, Silenus was quite ugly, but also a wise away, pondering many things. He pondered from profit. Accordingly the statues of Silenus were hollow, and when you many sides why took them apart, you would find little figures of gods inside them. The in blanche floor should be a truth and beauty under the unappealing exterior. And so, for Alci vexed, and what Labiades, it was the same with Socrates, who was so ugly as to be repellent, but behind it all, he considered her greeting, her whose face radiated inner beauty and contentment. The effect was Confus, 192, The Art of Seduction words, he examined her and attractive. Antiquity's other great seducer, Cleopatra, also sent out minutely, her farewell, mixed signals, by all accounts physically alluring, in voice, face, body, and whole behavior. But manner, she also had a brilliantly active mind, which for many writers of since he was uncertain of her motive, whether she the time made her seem somewhat masculine in spirit. These contrary had acted from enmity, or qualities gave her complexity, and complexity gave her power. Love, he wavered into capture, and hold attention, you need to show attributes that go perplexity. He wavered in his thoughts now here, against your physical appearance, creating depth and mystery. If you have a now there. At one moment sweet face and an innocent air, let out hints of something dark, even he was off in one direction, vaguely cruel in your character. It is not advertised in your words, but in then suddenly in another, till he had so ensnared your manner. The actor Errol Flynn had a boyishly angelic face, and a slight himself in the toils of his air of sadness. Beneath this outward appearance, however, women could own desire that he was sense an underlying cruelty, a criminal streak, an exciting kind of danger powerless to escape. Oh useness! This play of contrary qualities attracted obsessive interest. His entanglement had placed him in a quandary. Female equivalent is the type epitomized by Marilyn Monroe. She had, for he did not know the face and voice of a little girl, but something sexual and naughty whether she wished him or not powerfully from her as well. Madame Recamier did it all with her well or ill. He could not make out whether she eyes, the gaze of an angel, suddenly interrupted by something sensual, and loved or hated him. No flirtatious hope or despair did he playing with gender roles, is a kind of intriguing paradox that has a long consider, which did not forbid him either to advance history in seduction. The greatest Don Juans have had a touch of prettiness or retreat, hope and unfemininity, and the most attractive courtesans have had a masculine despair led him to and fro streak. The strategy, though, is only powerful when the under quality is in unresolved dissension. Merely hinted at, if the mix is too obvious, or striking it will seem bizarre, or hope spoke to him of love, despair of hatred. because even threatening. The great 17th-century French courtesan Ninon of this discord, he could do enclose was decidedly feminine in appearance, yet everyone who met yielded his firm belief neither her was struck by a touch of aggressiveness, and independence in her, but to hatred nor yet to love. Thus his feelings drifted in just a touch. The late 19th century Italian novelist Gabriele Dean, an unsure haven, Hope Nunzio was certainly masculine in his approaches, but there was a gentle bore him on, despair away. Ness, a consideration, mixed in, and an interest in feminine finery that he found no constancy in either. They agreed neither combinations can be juggled every which way. Oscar Wilde was quite one way or another. When feminine in appearance and manner, but the underlying suggestion that he despair came and told him was actually quite masculine drew both men and women to him. That his Blanchefleur was his enemy he faltered, and a potent variation on this theme is the blending of physical heat and sought to escape, but at emotional coldness. Dandies like Beau Brummel and Andy Warhol once came Hope, bringing by striking physical appearances, with a kind of coldness of manner, a diss him her love, and a fond tance from everything and everyone. They are both enticing and elusive, aspiration, and so perforce he remained. In the face of and people spend lifetimes chasing after such men, trying to shatter their such discord, he did not unattainability. The power of apparently unattainable people is devilishly nowhere to turn, no seductive, we want to be the one to break them down. They also rap where could he go forward. The more he strove to flee, themselves in ambiguity and mystery, either talking very little, or talking the more firmly love forced only of surface matters, hinting at a depth of character you can never reach him back. The harder he when Marlene Dietrich entered a room, or arrived at a party, all eyes and struggled to escape, love drew him back more firmly. Inevitably turned to her. First there were her startling clothes, chosen to make heads turn. Then there was her air of nonchalant indifference. Men and Gottfried von Strasbourg, Tristan, translated by.t, women too, became obsessed with her, thinking of her long after other Hatto memories of the evening had faded. Remember, that first impression, that send mixed signals 193 entrance, is critical. To show too much desire for attention is to signal insecurity, and will often drive people away. Play it too cold and disinterested, on the other hand, and no one will bother coming near. The trick is to combine the two attitudes at the same moment. It is the essence of coquetry. Perhaps you have a reputation for a particular quality, which immediately comes to mind when people see you. You will better hold their attention by suggesting that behind this reputation, some other quality lies lurking. No one had a darker, more sinful reputation than Lord Byron. What drove women wild was that behind his somewhat cold and disdainful exterior, they could sense that he was actually quite romantic, even spiritual. Byron played this up with his melancholic airs and occasional kind deed. Transfixed and confused, many women thought that they could be the one to lead him back to goodness, to make him a faithful lover. Once a woman entertained such a thought, she was completely under his spell. It is not difficult to create such a seductive effect. Should you be known as eminently rational, say, hint at something irrational. Johannes, the narrator in Kierkegaard's The Seducer's Diary, first treats the young Cordelia with businesslike politeness, as his reputation would lead her to expect. Yet she very soon overhears him making remarks that hint at a wild, poetic streak in his character, and she is excited and intrigued. These principles have applications far beyond sexual seduction. To hold the attention of a broad public, to seduce them into thinking about you, you need to mix your signals. Display too much of one quality, even if it is a noble one, like knowledge or efficiency, and people will feel that you lack humanity. We are all complex and ambiguous, full of contradictory impulses. If you show only one side, even if it is your good side, you will wear on people's nerves. They will suspect you are a hypocrite. Mahatma Gandhi, a saintly figure, openly confessed to feelings of anger and vengefulness. John F. Kennedy, the most seductive American public figure of modern times, was a walking paradox, an East Coast aristocrat with a love of the common man, an obviously masculine man, a war hero, with a vulnerability you could sense underneath, an intellectual who loved popular culture. People were drawn to Kennedy like the steel filings in Wilde's fable. A bright surface may have a decorative charm, but what draws your eye into a painting is a depth of field, an inexpressible ambiguity, a surreal complexity. 194. The Art of Seduction symbol, the theater curtain. On stage, the curtain's heavy deep red folds attract your eye with their hypnotic surface. But what really fascinates and draws you in is what you think might be happening behind the curtain, the light peeking through, the suggestion of a secret, something about to happen. You feel the thrill of a voyeur about to watch a performance. Reversal. The complexity you signal to other people will only affect them properly if they have the capacity to enjoy a mystery. Some people like things simple, and lack the patience to pursue a person who confuses them. They prefer to be dazzled and overwhelmed. The great Belle Epoque courtesan known as La Belle Otero would work a complex magic on artists and political figures who fell for her, but in dealing with the more uncomplicated, sensual male she would astound them with spectacle and beauty. When meeting a woman for the first time, Casanova might dress in the most fantastic outfit, with jewels and brilliant colors to dazzle the eye. He would use the target's reaction to gauge whether or not she would demand a more complicated seduction. Some of his victims, particularly young girls, needed no more than the glittering and spellbinding appearance, which was really what they wanted, and the seduction would stay on that level. Everything depends on your target. Do not bother creating depth for people who are insensitive to it, or who may even be put off or disturbed by it. You can recognize such types by their preference for the simpler pleasures in life, their lack of patience for a more nuanced story. With them, keep it simple. Appear to be an object of desire. Create triangles. Few are drawn to the person whom others avoid or any neglect. People gather around those who have already attracted interest. We want what other people want. To draw your victims closer and make them hungry to possess you, you must create an aura of desirability, of being wanted and courted by many. It will become a point of vanity for them to be the preferred object of your attention, to win you away from a crowd of admirers. Manufacture the illusion of popularity by surrounding yourself with members of the opposite sex, friends, former lovers, present suitors. Create triangles that stimulate rivalry and raise your value. Build a reputation that precedes you. If many have succumbed to your charms, there must be a reason. Creating triangles. One evening in 1882, the 32-year-old Prussian philosopher Paul Rie, living in Rome at the time, visited the house of an older woman who ran a salon for writers and artists. Rie noticed a newcomer there, a 21-year-old Russian girl named Luvon Salome, who had come to Rome on holiday with her mother. Rie introduced himself, and they began a conversation that lasted well into the night. Her ideas, let me tell you about God and morality, were like his own. She talked with such intensity, gentleman I once knew, yet, at the same time her eyes seemed to flirt with him. Over the next few although he was of pleasing appearance and days, Rie and Salome took long walks through the city. Intrigued by her modest behavior, and also a mind yet confused by the emotions she aroused, he wanted to spend more. Very capable warrior was time with her. Then, one day, she startled him with a proposition. She not so outstanding as regards any of these knew he was a close friend of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, then qualities that they were also visiting Italy. The three of them, she said, should travel together. No, not to be found many who actually lived together, in a kind of philosopher's menage a trois. A fierce were his equal and even better. However, as luck critic of Christian morals, Rie found this idea delightful. He wrote to his would-have-it, a certain friend about Salome, describing how desperate she was to meet him. After Lady fell very deeply in love, a few such letters, Nietzsche hurried to Rome. with him. She saw that he felt the same way, and as Ree had made this invitation to please Salome, and to impress her, her love grew day by day, also wanted to see if Niets shared his enthusiasm for the young girls, there not being any way for ideas. But as soon as Niets arrived, something unpleasant happened. Them to speak to each, the great philosopher, who had always been a loner, was obviously smitten other. She revealed her sentiments to another lady, with Salome. Instead of the three of them sharing intellectual conversa, who she hoped would be of tie-ins together, Niets seemed to be conspiring to get the girl alone. Service to her in this affair. When Ree caught glimpses of Niets and Salome talking without in now, this lady neither in rank nor beauty was a whit cluding him, he felt shivers of jealousy. Forget about some philosophers inferior to the first, and it manage a choice. Salome was his, he had discovered her, and he would not came about that when she share her, even with his good friend. Somehow he had to get her alone. Heard the young man, whom she had never seen, only then could he woo and win her. Spoken of so affectionately, Madame Salome had planned to escort her daughter back to Russia, and came to realize that but Salome wanted to stay in Europe. Ree intervened, offering to travel the other woman, whom with the Salomes to Germany and introduce them to his own mother, she knew was extremely discreet and intelligent, who, he promised, would look after the girl and act as a chaperone. Ree loved him beyond words, knew that his mother would be a lax guardian at best. Madame Salome she straightway began to agree to this proposal, but Niets was harder to shake. He decided to imagine that he must be the most handsome, to join them on their northward journey to Ree's home in Prussia. At one wisest, the most discreet of point in the trip, Niets and Salome took a walk by themselves and men, and in short, the 197-198, the Art of Seduction man most worthy of her when they came back. Ree had the feeling that something physical had love in all the world. So, happened between them. His blood boiled. Salome was slipping from his never having set eyes on grasp. Him, she fell in love with him so passionately that finally the group split up. The mother returning to Russia, Niets till she set out to win him not his summer place in Teutoburg, Ree and Salome staying behind at Ree's for her friend but for home. But Salome did not stay long. She accepted an invitation of Niets herself, and in this she succeeded with little effort. Chaise to visit him, unchaperoned, in Teutoburg. In her absence Ree was for indeed she was consumed with doubts and anger. He wanted her more than ever, and was woman more to be wooed prepared to redouble his efforts. When she finally came back, Ree vented then to do the wooing. His bitterness, railing against Niets, criticizing his philosophy, and cues and now listened to the splendid sequel, not long tying his motives toward the girl. But Salome took Niets' side. Ree afterward it happened that was in despair, he felt he had lost her for good. Yet a few days later she saw a letter which she had prized him again. She had decided she wanted to live with him, and with written to her lover fell into the hands of another him alone. Woman of comparable at last Ree had what he had wanted, or so he thought. The couple set rank, charm, and beauty, fled in Berlin, where they rented an apartment together. But now, to Ree's and since she, like most women, was curious and dismay, the old pattern repeated. They lived together, but Salome was eager to learn secrets. She courted on all sides by young men. The darling of Berlin's intellectuals, opened the letter and read who admired her independent spirit, her refusal to compromise, she was it. Realizing that it was written from the depths of constantly surrounded by a harem of men, who referred to her as her ex-passion, in the most loving celancy. Once again Ree found himself competing for her attention. On ardent terms, she was driven to despair. He left her a few years later, and eventually committed at first moved with suicide. Compassion, for she knew very well from whom the in 1911, Sigmund Freud met Salome, now known as Lou Andreas letter came, and to whom it Salome, at a conference in Germany. She wanted to devote herself to the was addressed, then, psychoanalytical movement, she said, and Freud found her enchanting, however, such was the power of the words she though, like everyone else, he knew the story of her infamous affair with Reed, turning them over in Nietzsche, see page 46, The Dandy. Salome had no background in psy her mind and considering analysis, or in therapy of any kind, but Freud admitted her into the in what kind of man it must be who had been able to know a circle of followers who attended his private lectures. Soon after she aroused such great love, she joined the circle. One of Freud's most promising and brilliant students, Dr. at once began to fall in love. Victor Torsk, 16 years younger than Salome, fell in love with her. Sat with him herself, and the Lomes relationship with Freud had been platonic, but he had grown ex-letter was without doubt far more effective than if the tremendly fond of her. He was depressed when she missed a lecture, and young man had himself would send her notes and flowers. Her involvement in a love affair with written it to her. And just Torsk made him intensely jealous, and he began to compete for her Aten, as it sometimes happens that the poison prepared for Tyon. Torsk had been like a son to him, but the son was threatening to steal. A prince kills the one who the father's platonic lover. Soon, however, Salome left Torsk. Now her tastes his food, so that poor friendship with Freud was stronger than ever, and so it lasted until her woman, in her greediness, drank the love potion death, in 1937. Prepared for another. What more is there to say? The affair was no secret, and things so developed that interpretation. Men did not just fall in love with Lou Andreas Salome, many other women besides. They were overwhelmed with the desire to possess her, to wrest her away, partly to spite the others from others, to be the proud owner of her body and spirit. They rarely saw, and partly to follow her alone. She always in some way surrounded herself with other men. Appear to be an object of desire. Create triangles. 199. When she saw that Re was interested in her, she mentioned her desire to example, put every care meet Nietzsche. This inflamed Re, and made him want to marry her, and an effort into winning this man's love, squabbling over to keep him for himself, but she insisted on meeting his friend. His letters it for a while as boys do to Nietzsche betrayed his desire for this woman, and this in turn kindled for Cherries Nietzsche's own desire for her, even before he had met her. Every time one, Baldassare Castiglione, of the two men was alone with her, the other was in the background. The book Off Courtier, then, later on, most of the men who met her knew of the infamous translated by George Bull Nietzsche affair, and this only increased their desire to possess her, to compete with Nietzsche's memory. Freud's affection for her, similarly, turned into potent desire when he had to vie with Torsk for her attention. Salome most of the time we prefer one thing to another was intelligent and attractive enough on her own account, but her constant, because that is what our strategy of imposing a triangle of relationships on her suitors made her to friends already prefer, or so ability intense. And while they fought over her, she had the power, being because that object has desired by all and subject to none. Marked social significance. Adults, when they are our desire for another person almost always involves social considerer hungry, are just like Tyans. We are attracted to those who are attractive to other people. We want children in that they seek to possess them and steal them away. You can believe all the sentimental out the foods that others take. In their love affairs, nonsense you want to about desire, but in the end, much of it has to do they seek out the man, or with vanity and greed. Do not whine and moralize about people's selfish woman whom others find ness, but simply use it to your advantage. The illusion that you are desired attractive and abandon those who are not sought by others will make you more attractive to your victims than your beautiful after. When we say of a face, or your perfect body. And the most effective way to create that illusion man, or woman that he or is to create a triangle. Impose another person between you and your victim. She is desirable. What we really mean, is that others and subtly make your victim aware of how much this other person wants desire them. It is not that you. The third point on the triangle does not have to be just one person, they have some particular surround yourself with admirers, reveal your past conquests, in other quality, but because they words, envelop yourself in an aura of desirability. Make your targets conform to some currently modish model. Compete with your past and your present. They will long to possess you all to serge Moscovici, the age themselves, giving you great power for as long as you elude their grasp. Fail of the crowd, a historical to make yourself an object of desire right from the start, and you will end treatise on mass cycle up the sorry slave to the whims of your lovers. They will abandon you the OGY, translated BYJ. C. White House moment they lose interest. A person will desire any object, so long as he is convinced that it is desired by another person whom he admires. It will be greatly to your advantage to entertain the René Girard lady you would win with an account of the number of women who are in love with you, and of the keys to seduction decided advances which they have made to you. For this will not only prove we are social creatures, and are immensely influenced by the tastes, and that you are great favorite desires of other people. Imagine a large social gathering. UCA with the ladies, and a man alone, whom nobody talks to for any length of time, and who is WAN of true honor, but it will doing around without company. Isn't there a kind of self-fulfilling isola, convince her that she may have the honor of being tie on about him? Why is he alone, why is he avoided? There has to be a enrolled in the same list, reason. Until someone takes pity on this man, and starts up a conversation, and of being praised in the 200th the art of seduction same way, in the presence with him, he will look unwanted and unwantable. But over there, in an of your other female other corner, is a woman surrounded by people. They laugh at her remarks, friends. This will greatly, and as they laugh, others join the group, attracted by its gaiety. When she delight her, and you need not be surprised if she moves around, people follow. Her face is glowing with attention. There has testifies her admiration of to be a reason. Your character by throwing in both cases, of course. There doesn't actually have to be a reason at her arms around your neck on the spot. Or the neglected man may have quite charming qualities, supposing you ever talk to him, but most likely you won't. Desirability is a social illu, LOLAMONTEZ, the arts and secrets of beauty, with Sion. Its source is less what you say or do, or any kind of boasting or self-hints to gentlemen on the advertisement, than the sense that other people desire you. To turn your art of fascinating targets' interest into something deeper, into desire, you must make them see you as a person whom others cherish and covet. Desire is both imitative, we like what others like, and competitive, we want to take away from author René Girard's mimetic heirs what they have. As children, we wanted to monopolize the attention of desire occurs, when an individual subject desires a parent, to draw it away from other siblings. This sense of rivalry pervades an object, because it is human desire, repeating throughout our lives. Make people compete for desired by another subject, your attention, make them see you as sought after by everyone else. The here designated as the rival, desire is modeled on aura of desirability will envelop you. The wishes or actions of your admirers can be friends, or even suitors. Call it the harem effect. Another. Philippe Lecoux, Pauline Bonaparte, sister of Napoleon, raised her value in men's eyes by Labarthe says that the basic hypothesis upon ways having a group of worshipful men around her at balls and parties. If which rests Girard's famous she went for a walk, it was never with one man, always with two or three. Analysis is that every perhaps these men were simply friends, or even just props and hangers-on. Desire is the desire of the sight of them was enough to suggest that she was prized and desired, but other and not immediately desire of an object. Every woman worth fighting over. Andy Warhol, too, surrounded himself with structure of desire, is the most glamorous, interesting people he could find. To be part of his in triangular, including the inner circle meant that you were desirable as well. By placing himself in the other, mediator or model, whose desire middle, but keeping himself aloof from it all, he made everyone compete imitates, every desire is for his attention. He stirred people's desire to possess him by holding back. Thus from its inception practices like these not only stimulate competitive desires, they take aim tapped by hatred and rivalry, in short, the origin at people's prime weakness, their vanity and self-esteem. We can endure of desire is mimesis, feeling that another person has more talent, or more money, but the sense mimeticism, and know that a rival is more desirable than we are, that is unbearable. In the early desire is ever forged which 18th century, the Duc de Richelieu, a great rake, managed to say does not desire forthwith the death or disappearance deuce a young woman who was rather religious, but whose husband, the dolt of the model or exemplary was often away. He then proceeded to seduce her upstairs neighbor, a character which gave rise young widow. When the two women discovered that he was going from to it, one to the other in the same night, they confronted him. A lesser man, James Mandrel, Don Juan and the Point of would have fled, but not the Duke. He understood the dynamic of vanity honor and desire. Neither woman wanted to feel that he preferred the other. And so he managed to arrange a little menage a trois, knowing that now they would struggle between themselves to be the favorite. When people's vanity is at risk, you can make them do whatever you want. According to Stendhal, if there is a woman you are interested in, pay attention to her sister. That will stir a triangular desire. Your reputation, your illustrious past as a seducer, is an effective way appear to be an object of desire. Create triangles, 201 of creating an aura of desirability. Women threw themselves at Errol Flynn's It's Annoying That Our New Feet, not because of his handsome face, and certainly not because of his acquaintance likes the boy. But aren't the best things acting skills, but because of his reputation. They knew that other women in life free to all. The sun had found him irresistible. Once he had established that reputation, he did shines on everyone. The not have to chase women anymore, they came to him. Men who believe Moon, accompanied by that a rakish reputation, will make women fear or distrust them, and should countless stars, leads even the beasts to pasture. What be played down, are quite wrong. On the contrary, it makes them more can you think of lovely attractive? The virtuous Duchess de Montpensier, the grande mademoiselle of the water. But it flows 17th century France, began by enjoying a friendship with the rake for the whole world. Is love alone then something lawson, but a troubling thought soon occurred to her. If a man with furtive rather than lawson's past did not see her as a possible lover, something had to be wrong, something to be gloried in. With her. This anxiety eventually pushed her into his arms. To be part of her exactly, that's just it. I don't want any of the good great seducers' club of conquests, can be a matter of vanity and pride. We things of life unless people are happy to be in such company, to have our name broadcast as this man, or are envious of them. Woman's lover. Your own reputation may not be so alluring, but you must, Petronius, the Satyricon, find a way to suggest to your victim that others, many others, have found translated by P. Sullivan you desirable. It is reassuring. There is nothing like a restaurant full of empty tables to persuade you not to go in. A variation on the triangle strategy is the use of contrasts. Careful exploitation of people who are dull or unattractive may enhance your desirability by comparison. At a social affair, for instance, make sure that your target has to chat with the most boring person available. Come to the rescue and your target will be delighted to see you. In The Seducer's Diary, by Søren Kierkegaard, Johannes has designs on the innocent young Cordelia. Knowing that his friend Edward is hopelessly shy and dull, he encourages this man to court her. A few weeks of Edward's attentions will make her eyes wander in search of someone else, anyone else, and Johannes will make sure that they settle on him. Johannes chose to strategize and maneuver, but almost any social environment will contain contrasts you can make use of almost naturally. The 17th century English actress Nell Gwynn became the main mistress of King Charles II, because her humor and unaffectedness made her that much more desirable among the many stiff and pretentious ladies of Charles's court. When the Shanghai actress Jiang Qing met Mao Zedong in 1937, she did not have to do much to seduce him. The other women in his mountain camp in Yan'an dressed like men, and were decidedly unfeminine. The sight alone of Jiang was enough to seduce Mao, who soon left his wife for her. To make use of contrasts, either develop and display those attractive attributes, humor, vivacity, and so on, that are the scarcest in your own social group, or choose a group in which your natural qualities are rare, and will shine. The use of contrasts has vast political ramifications, for a political figure must also seduce and seem desirable. Learn to play up the qualities that your rivals lack. PT.2, Tsar in 18th century Russia, was arrogant and irresponsible, so his wife, Catherine the Great, did all she could to seem modest and dependable. When Vladimir Lenin returned to Russia in 1917 after Tsar Nicholas II had been deposed, he made a show of decisiveness. 202, The Art of Seduction, and discipline, precisely what no other leader had at the time. In the American presidential race of 1980, the irresoluteness of Jimmy Carter made the single-mindedness of Ronald Reagan look desirable. Contrasts are eminently seductive, because they do not depend on your own words or self-advertisements. The public reads them unconsciously, and sees what it wants to see. Finally, appearing to be desired by others will raise your value, but often how you carry yourself can influence this as well. Do not let your targets see you so often, keep your distance, seem unattainable, out of their reach. An object that is rare and hard to obtain is generally more prized. Symbol, the trophy. What makes you want to win the trophy, and to see it as something worth having, is the sight of the other competitors. Some, out of a spirit of kindness, may want to reward everyone for trying, but the trophy then loses its value. It must represent not only your victory, but everyone else's defeat. Reversal. There is no reversal. It is essential to appear desirable in the eyes of others. Create a need, stir anxiety and discontent. A perfectly satisfied person cannot be seduced. Tension and disharmony must be instilled in your targets' minds. Stir within them feelings of discontent, an unhappiness with their circumstances and with themselves. Their life lacks adventure, they have strayed from the ideals of their youth, they have become boring. The feelings of inadequacy that you create will give you space to insinuate yourself, to make them see you as the answer to their problems. Pain and anxiety are the proper precursors to pleasure. Learn to manufacture the need that you can fill. Opening a wound in the coal mining town of Eastwood, in central England, David Herbert Lawrence was considered something of a strange lad. Pale and delicate, he had no time for games or boyish pursuits, but was interested in literature, and he preferred the company of girls, who made up most of his friends. Lawrence often visited the Chambers family, who had been his neighbors until they moved out of Eastwood to a farm not far away. He liked to study with the Chambers sisters, particularly Jessie. She was shy and no one can fall in love if he is even partially satisfied. Serious, and getting her to open up and confide in him was a pleasurable with what he has or who challenge. Jessie grew quite attached to Lawrence over the years, and there he is. The experience of became good friends. Falling in love originates in an extreme depression, and one day in 1906, Lawrence, 21 at the time, did not show up, inability to find something at the usual hour for his study session with Jessie. He finally arrived, much that has value in everyday later, in a mood she had never seen before, preoccupied and quiet. Now at life. The symptom of the predisposition to fall in was her turn to make him open up. Finally he talked. He felt she was getting love, is not the conscious too close to him. What about her future? Whom would she marry? Sir, desire to do so, the intense timely not him, he said, for they were just friends. But it was unfair of him desire to enrich our lives. It is the profound sense of to keep her from seeing others. They should of course remain friends and being worthless and of have their talks, but maybe less often. When he finished and left, she felt a having nothing, that is strange emptiness. She had yet to think much about love or marriage. Sid valuable and the shame of Denley she had doubts. What would her future be? Why wasn't she thinking not having it? For this reason, falling in love about it. She felt anxious and upset, without understanding why. Occurs more frequently. Lawrence continued to visit, but everything had changed. He criticized among young people, since her for this and that. She wasn't very physical. What kind of wife would they are profoundly uncertain, unsure of their she make anyway. A man needed more from a woman than just talk. He worth, and often ashamed likened her to a nun. They began to see each other less often. When, some of themselves. The same time later, Lawrence accepted a teaching position at a school outside London. Thing applies to people of other ages. When they losed on, she felt part relieved to be rid of him for a while. But when he said something in their lives, goodbye to her, and intimated that it might be for the last time, she broke when their youth ends or down and cried. Then he started sending her weekly letters. He would when they start to grow old. Write about girls he was seeing, maybe one of them would be his wife. Finally, at his behest, she visited him in London. They got along well, as in, Francesco Alberoni, falling in love, translated the old times, but he continued to badger her about her future, picking at by Lawrence Venuti that old wound. At Christmas he was back in Eastwood, and when he visited her he seemed exultant. He had decided that it was Jessie he should marry, that he had in fact been attracted to her all along. They should keep it quiet for a while, although his writing career was taking off. His first 205-206 The Art of Seduction, What Can Love Be novel was about to be published. He needed to make more money. Caught then? I said. Off guard by this sudden announcement, and overwhelmed with happiness, mortal. Far from it. Jessie agreed to everything, and they became lovers. Well, what? As in my previous examples, he is soon, however, the familiar pattern repeated, criticisms, breakups, and halfway between mortal announcements that he was engaged to another girl. This only deepened his an immortal. What sought hold on her? It was not until 1912 that she finally decided never to see him of being is he then, Diotima. He is a great again, disturbed by his portrayal of her in the autobiographical novel Sun's Spirit, Socrates, Everything and Lovers. But Lawrence remained a lifelong obsession for her. That is of the nature of her in 1913, a young Englishwoman named Ivy Lowe, who had read Spirit is half god and half man. Who are his Lawrence's novels, began to correspond with him, her letters gushing with parents. I asked. That admiration. By now Lawrence was married, to a German woman, the is rather a long story, she Baroness Frieda von Richthofen. To Lowe's surprise, though, he invited her answered, but I will tell to visit him and his wife in Italy. She knew he was probably something of a you. On the day that Aphrodite was born the Don Juan, but was eager to meet him, and accepted his invitation. Gods were feasting, among Lawrence was not what she had expected. His voice was high-pitched, his them contrivance the sun eyes were piercing, and there was something vaguely feminine about him. Of invention, and after dinner, seeing that a party soon they were taking walks together, with Lawrence confiding in Lowe. Was in progress, poverty she felt that they were becoming friends, which delighted her. Then Sid came to beg and stood at Denley. Just before she was to leave, he launched into a series of criticisms of the door. Now contrivance was drunk with nectar, she was so unspontaneous, so predictable, less human being than raw wine, I may say, had not bought. Devastated by this unexpected attack, she nevertheless had to agree, yet been discovered, and what he had said was true. What could he have seen in her in the first went out into the garden of place? Who was she anyway? Lowe left Italy feeling empty, but then Zeus, and was overcome by sleep. So poverty, thinking Lawrence continued to write to her, as if nothing had happened. She soon to alleviate her wretched realized that she had fallen hopelessly in love with him, despite everything conditioned by bearing a child he had said to her. Or was it not despite what he had said, but because of it? To contrivance, lay with him and conceived love. In 1914, the writer John Middleton Murray received a letter from Since Love Was Begotten on Lawrence, a good friend of his. In the letter, out of nowhere, Lawrence Aphrodite's birthday, and criticized Middleton Murray for being passionless, and not gallant enough since he has also an innate passion for the beautiful, with his wife, the novelist Catherine Mansfield. Middleton Murray later, and so for the beauty of wrote, I had never felt for a man before what his letter made me feel for Aphrodite herself, he him. It was a new thing, a unique thing, in my experience, and it was to became her follower and servant. Again, having main unique. He felt that beneath Lawrence's criticisms lay some weird contrivance for his father kind of affection. Whenever he saw Lawrence from then on, he felt and poverty for his strange physical attraction that he could not explain. Mother, he bears the following character. He is always poor, and far from being sensitive and interpretation. The number of women, and of men, who fell under beautiful, as most people Lawrence's spell is astonishing given how unpleasant he could be. In almost imagine, he is hard and weather-beaten, shoeless every case the relationship began in friendship, with frank talks, exchanges and homeless, always of confidences, a spiritual bond. Then, invariably, he would suddenly turn sleeping out for want of or against them, voicing harsh personal criticisms. He would know them well bed, on the ground, on doorsteps, and in the street. By that time, and the criticisms were often quite accurate, and hit a nerve. So far he takes after his this would inevitably trigger confusion in his victims, and a sense of auntie mother and lives in want. Etty, a feeling that something was wrong with them. Jolted out of their usual, but, being also his father's sense of normality, they would feel divided inside. With half of their minds create a need, stir anxiety and discontent. 207 They wondered why he was doing this, and felt he was unfair. With the son, he schemes to get for other half, they believed it was all true. Then, in those moments of himself whatever is beautiful and good, he is doubt, they would get a letter, or a visit from him in which he was his old bold and forward and charming self. Strenuous, always devising now they saw him differently now they were weak and vulnerable, in tricks like a cunning need of something, and he would seem so strong. Now he drew them to huntsman. Him, feelings of friendship turning into affection and desire. Once they felt, Plato, Symposium. Translated by Walter uncertain about themselves, they were susceptible to falling in love. Hamilton Most of us protect ourselves from the harshness of life by succumbing to routines and patterns, by closing ourselves off from others. But underlying these habits is a tremendous sense of insecurity and defensiveness. We are all like pieces of the feel we are not really living. The seducer must pick at this wound and bring coins that children break in half for keepsakes, these semi-conscious thoughts into full awareness. This was what Lawrence, making 2 out of 1, did. His sudden, brutally unexpected jabs would hit people at their weak like the flatfish, and each spot of us is forever seeking the half that will tally with. Although Lawrence had great success with his frontal approach, it is himself. And so all often better to stir thoughts of inadequacy and uncertainty indirectly. By this to do, is a relic of that hinting at comparisons to yourself, or to others, and by insinuating some original state of ours when we were whole, and now, how that your victims' lives are less grand than they had imagined. You when we are longing for want them to feel at war with themselves, torn in 2 directions, and angst and following after that IOUs about it. Anxiety, a feeling of lack and need, is the precursor of all primeval wholeness. We say we are in love. Sire. These jolts in the victim's mind create space for you to insinuate your poison, the siren call of adventure, or fulfillment, that will make them follow. Aristophanes' speech Plato's Symposium, quoted you into your web. Without anxiety and a sense of lack there can be no James Mandrell, Don Juan Seduction. And the point of honor desire and love have for their object things or qualities, which a man does not at present possess, but which he Don John, well met, pretty lass. What? Are lacks. They're such handsome, Socrates creatures as you amongst these fields, these trees and rocks. Charlotta, I am as you see, sir. Don Keys to Seduction John, are you of this village? Charlotta, yes, sir. Don John, what's everyone wears a mask in society, we pretend to be more sure of your name. Charlotta, selves than we are. We do not want other people to glimpse that Charlotta, sir, at your doubting self within us. In truth, our egos and personalities are much more service. Don John, are fragile than they appear to be, they cover up feelings of confusion and what a fine person 'tis. What piercing eyes. Emptiness. As a seducer, you must never mistake a person's appearance for Charlotta, sir, you make the reality. People are always susceptible to being seduced, because in fact me ashamed. Don everyone lacks a sense of completeness, feels something missing deep in John, pretty Charlotta, you are not married, are sighed. Bring their doubts and anxieties to the surface, and they can be led in you. Charlotta, no, sir, Lord to follow you. But I am soon to be, with no one can see you as someone to follow or fall in love with unless Piero, son to goody Simonetta. Don John, they first reflect on themselves somehow, and on what they are missing. Be what? Showed such a one for the seduction proceeds. You must place a mirror in front of them in as you be wife to a 208 The Art of Seduction peasant. No, no, that's a which they glimpse that inner emptiness. Made aware of a lack, they now profanation of so much can focus on you as the person who can fill that empty space. Remember, beauty. You was not born, most of us are lazy. To relieve our feelings of boredom, or inadequacy on to live in a village. You certainly deserve a better. Our own takes too much effort. Letting someone else do the job is both fortune and heaven, easier and more exciting. The desire to have someone fill up our emptiness, which knows it well, is the weakness on which all seducers prey. Make people anxious about the brought me hither on purpose to hinder this future, make them depressed, make them question their identity, make marriage, and do justice to them sense the boredom that gnaws at their life. The ground is prepared. Your charms, for in short, the seeds of seduction can be sown. Fair Charlotta, I love you in Plato's Dialogue Symposium, the West's oldest treatise on love, and with all my heart, and if you'll consent I'll deliver text that has had a determining influence on our ideas of desire. The Cow from this miserable Tesan diatimer explains to Socrates the parentage of Eros, the god of love. Place, and put you in the Eros's father was contrivance, or cunning, and his mother was poverty, or condition you deserve. This love is doubtless need. Eros takes after his parents, he is constantly in need, which he is sudden, but 'tis an effect of stantly contriving to fill. As the god of love, he knows that love cannot be your great beauty. I love induced in another person unless they too feel need. And that is what is you as much in a quarter of an hour as I showed arrows do, piercing people's flesh, they make them feel a lack, an ache, or another in 6 months. Hunger. This is the essence of your task as a seducer. Like Eros, you must, Molière, Don John, or, create a wound in your victim, aiming at their soft spot, the chink in the libertine, translated by self-esteem. If they are stuck in a rut, make them feel it more deeply, in JOHNOZELL, in Oscar innocently, bringing it up, and talking about it. What you want is a wound, MANDEL, ED, the theater of Don Juan, an insecurity you can expand a little, an anxiety that can best be relieved by involvement with another person, namely you. They must feel the wound before they fall in love. Notice how Lawrence stirred anxiety, always hitting for I stand tonight facing at his victim's weak spot, for Jessie Chambers, her physical coldness, for Ivy West on what was once the last frontier. From the low, her lack of spontaneity, for Middleton Murray, his lack of gallantry. Lands that stretched 3 Cleopatra got Julius Caesar to sleep with her the first night he met her, 1,000 miles behind me, but the real seduction, the one that made him her slave, began later. In there the pioneers of old gave up their safety, their comfort. Ensuing conversations, she talked repeatedly of Alexander the Great, and sometimes their lives to hero from whom she was supposedly descended. No one could compare to build a new world here in him. By implication, Caesar was made to feel inferior. Understanding that the West, they were not beneath his bravado. Caesar was insecure. Cleopatra awakened in him and the captives of their own doubts, the prisoners of anxiety, a hunger to prove his greatness. Once he felt this way, he was easily their own price tags. They're further seduced. Doubts about his masculinity was his tender spot. Motto was not every man. When Caesar was assassinated, Cleopatra turned her sights on Mark for himself, but all for the common cause. They Antony, one of Caesar's successors in the leadership of Rome. Antony were determined to make loved pleasure and spectacle, and his tastes were crude. She appeared to him that new world strong and first on her royal barge, then wined and dined and banqueted him. Every free, to overcome its hazards and its hardships, thing was geared to suggest to him the superiority of the Egyptian way of to conquer the enemies that life over the Roman, at least when it came to pleasure. The Romans were threatened from without, boring and unsophisticated by comparison. And once Antony was made to and within. Today feel how much he was missing in spending his time with his dull soldiers. Some would say that those struggles are all over, that in his matronly Roman wife, he could be made to see Cleopatra, as the in all the horizons have been carnation of all that was exciting. He became her slave. Explored, that all this is the law of the exotic. In your role of seducer, try to position battles have been won, that there is no longer in yourself as coming from outside, as a stranger of sorts. You represent, create a need, stir anxiety and discontent. 209 Change, difference, a breakup of routines. Make your victims feel that by American frontier. But by comparison their lives are boring and their friends less interesting than they trust that no one in this vast assemblage will agree had thought. Lawrence made his targets feel personally inadequate. If you with those sentiments find it hard to be so brutal, concentrate on their friends, their circum. I tell you the new stances, the externals of their lives. There are many legends of Don Juan, frontier is here, whether but they often describe him seducing a village girl, by making her feel that we seek it or not. It would be easier to shrink her life, is horribly provincial. He, meanwhile, wears glittering clothes and back from that frontier, to has a noble bearing. Strange and exotic, he is always from somewhere else. Look to the safe mediocrity first. She feels the boredom of her life, then she sees him as her salvation. Of the past, to be lulled by good intentions and high remember, people prefer to feel that if their life is uninteresting, it not be rhetoric, and those who cause of themselves, but because of their circumstances, the dull people prefer that course should they know, the town into which they were born. Once you make them feel not cast their votes for me, regardless of party. But the law of the exotic, seduction is easy. Believe that the time's another devilishly seductive area to aim at is the victim's past. To grow demand invention, old is to renounce or compromise youthful ideals, to become less sponta innovation, imagination, decision. I am asking each nears, less alive in a way. This knowledge lies dormant in all of us. As a set of you to be new pioneers, Duca, you must bring it to the surface, make it clear how far people have on that new frontier. My strayed from their past goals and ideals. You, in turn, present yourself as call is to the young in representing that ideal, as offering a chance to recapture lost youth through heart, regardless of age. Adventure, through seduction. In her later years, Queen Elizabeth I of E.N. John F. Kennedy. Acceptance speech, as T.H.E. Gland was known as a rather stern and demanding ruler. She made it a point, presidential nominee of THE, not to let her courtiers see anything soft or weak in her. But then Robert Democratic Party, quoted Ian Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, came to court. Much younger than John Hellman, the Kennedy obsession, the Queen, the dashing Essex would often chastise her for her sourness. American myth of JFK, the Queen would forgive him, he was so exuberant and spontaneous, he could not control himself. But his comments got under her skin. In the presence of Essex, she came to remember all the youthful ideals, spiritedness, feminine charm, that had since vanished from her life. She also felt a little the normal rhythm of life oscillates in general between of that girlish spirit return, when she was around him. He quickly became a mild satisfaction with her favorite, and soon she was in love with him. Old age is constantly oneself and a slight duped by youth, but first the young people must make it clear what the discomfort, originating in the knowledge of one's older ones are missing, how they have lost their ideals. Only then will they personal shortcomings. We feel that the presence of the young will let them recapture that spark, the should like to be as rebellious spirit that age and society have conspired to repress. Handsome, young, strong or clever as other people avow, this concept has infinite applications. Corporations and politicians' acquaintance. We wish we know that they cannot seduce their public into buying what they want could achieve as much as them to buy, or doing what they want them to do, unless they first awaken they do, long for similar advantages, positions, the sense of need and discontent. Make the masses uncertain about their same or greater success. To identity, and you can help define it for them. It is as true of groups or be delighted with oneself is tie-ins as it is of individuals. They cannot be seduced without being made to the exception, and often feel some lack. Part of John F. Kennedy's election strategy in 1960 was to enough, a smokescreen, which we produce for make Americans unhappy about the 1950s, and how far the country had ourselves and of course strayed from its ideals. In talking about the 1950s, he did not mention the others. Somewhere in it is nation's economic stability, or its emergence as a superpower. Instead, a lingering feeling of discomfort with ourselves implied that the period was marked by conformity, a lack of risk, an and a slight self-dislike. I venture, a loss of our frontier values. To vote for Kennedy was to assert that an increase of 210 the art of seduction, this spirit of discontent on a collective adventure, to go back to ideals we had given up. But before renders a person, especially anyone, joined his crusade, they had to be made aware of how much they susceptible to falling in had lost, what was missing. A group, like an individual, can get mired in love. In most cases this attitude of disquiet is routine, losing track of its original goals. Too much prosperity saps it of unconscious, but in some its strength. You can seduce an entire nation, by aiming at its collective insecure reaches the threshold of righty, that latent sense that not everything is what it seems. Stirring disartis awareness in the form of a slight uneasiness, or a faction with the present and reminding people about the glorious past, can stagnant dissatisfaction, or unsettle their sense of identity. Then you can be the one to redefine it, a realization of being upset grand seduction. Without knowing why. THEODORREIK, of love and lust symbol, Cupid's arrow. What awakens desire in the seduced is not a soft touch, or a pleasant sensation, it is a wound. The arrow creates a pain, an ache, a need for relief. Before desire there must be pain. Aim the arrow at the victim's weakest spot, creating a wound that you can open and reopen. Reversal: if you go too far in lowering the target's self-esteem, they may feel too insecure to enter into your seduction. Do not be heavy-handed, like Lawrence, always follow up the wounding attack with a soothing gesture. Otherwise you will simply alienate them. Charm is often a subtler and more effective route to seduction. The Victorian Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli always made people feel better about themselves. He deferred to them, made them the center of attention, made them feel witty and vibrant. He was a boon to their vanity, and they grew addicted to him. This is a kind of diffused seduction, lacking in tension, and in the deep emotions that the sexual variety stirs. It bypasses people's hunger, their need for some kind of fulfillment. But if you are subtle and clever, it can be a way of lowering their defenses, creating an unthreatening friendship. Once they are under your spell in this way, you can then open the wound. Indeed, after Disraeli had charmed Queen Victoria and established a friendship with her, he made her feel vaguely inadequate in the establishment of an empire and the realization of her ideals. Everything depends on the target. People who are riddled with insecurities may require the gentler variety. Once they feel comfortable with you, aim your arrows. Master the art of insinuation, making your targets feel dissatisfied and in need of your tie-on is essential, but if you are too obvious, they will see through you and grow defensive. There is no known defense, however, against insinuation, the art of planting ideas in people's minds by dropping elusive hints that take root days later, even appearing to them as their own idea. Insinua tie-on is the supreme means of influencing people. Create a sublanguage, bold statements followed by retraction and apology, ambiguous comments, banal talk combined with alluring glances, that enters the target's unconscious to convey your real meaning. Make everything suggestive. Insinuating desire. One evening in the 1770s, a young man went to the Paris Opera to meet his lover, the Countess de. The couple had been fighting, and he was anxious to see her again. The Countess had not arrived yet at her box, but from an adjacent one a friend of hers, Madame de T, called out to the young man to join her, remarking that it was an excellent stroke of luck that they had met that evening. He must keep her company as we were about to enter on a trip she had to take. The young man wanted urgently to see the chamber. She stopped me. Remember, she said, Countess, but Madame was charming and insistent, and he agreed to go with gravely, you are supposed her. Before he could ask why or where, she quickly escorted him to her never to have seen, never carriage outside, which then sped off. Even suspected, the young man enjoined his hostess to tell him where she was sanctuary you're about to enter. All this taking him. At first she just laughed, but finally she told him, to her whose was like an initiation rite. Vannes Chateau. The couple had been estranged, but had decided to reckon. She led me by the hand sile. Her husband was a bore, however, and she felt a charming young man across a small, dark corridor. My heart was like himself would liven things up. The young man was intrigued, Madame pounding as though I was an older woman, with a reputation for being rather formal, though he a young proselyte being put also knew she had a lover, a marquis. Why had she chosen him for this to the test before the celebration OJ the Great Cursion? Her story was not quite credible. Then, as they traveled, she sung mysteries. But just he look out the window at the passing landscape, as she was doing. Your Countess. He had to lean over toward her to do so, and just as he did, the carriage said, stopping. I was about jolted. She grabbed his hand and fell into his arms. She stayed there for to reply when the doors opened. My answer was moment, then pulled away from him rather abruptly. After an awkward sigh interrupted by admiration. Lentz, she said, do you intend to convince me of my imprudence in your I was astonished, regard. He protested that the incident had been an accident and reassured delighted. I no longer know what became of me, how he would behave himself. In truth, however, having her in his arms had and I began in good faith made him think otherwise. To believe in magic. They arrived at the chateau. The husband came to meet them, and the truth, I found myself in a vast cage of mirrors. Young man expressed his admiration of the building. What you see is which images were so nothing, Madame interrupted. I must take you to Monsieur's apartment. Artistically painted that before he could ask what she meant, the subject was quickly changed. They produced the illusion of all the objects their husband was indeed a bore, but he excused himself after supper. Now represented. Madame and the young man were alone. She invited him to walk with her, vivant denen, no in the gardens. It was a splendid evening, and as they walked, she slipped tomorrow, in Michel Feyher, her arm in his. She was not worried that he would take advantage of her, the libertine reader, she said, because she knew how attached he was to her good friend the Countess. They talked of other things, and then she returned to the topic of 214, The Art of Seduction, a few short years ago, in his lover. Is she making you quite happy? Oh, I fear the contrary, and this our native city, where fraud distresses me. Are you not often the victim of her strange whims? To and cunning prosper more the young man's surprise, Madame began to talk of the Countess in a way than love or loyalty. There was a noblewoman of that made it seem that she had been unfaithful to him, which was some striking beauty, and thing he had suspected. Madame sighed, she regretted saying such things impeccable breeding, who about her friend, and asked him to forgive her. Then, as if a new thought was endowed by nature with as loftier had occurred to her, she mentioned a nearby pavilion, a delightful place, temperament and shrewd full of pleasant memories. But the shame of it was locked and she an intellect as could be had no key. And yet they found their way to the pavilion, and lo and be found in any other woman hold, the door had been left open. It was dark inside, but the young man of her time. This lady, being of gentle birth, could sense that it was a place for trysts. They entered and sank onto a sofa, and finding herself married, and before he knew what had come over him, he took her in his arms. Off to a master woolen, Madame seemed to push him away, but then gave in. Finally she came to Draper, because he happened to be very rich, was unable her senses. They must return to the house. Had he gone too far? He must to stifle her heartfelt try to control himself. Contempt, for she was as they strolled back to the house, Madame remarked, what a deli firmly of the opinion that no man of low condition, sighest night we've just spent. Was she referring to what had happened in however wealthy was the pavilion? There is an even more charming room in the chateau, she deserving of a noble wife. Went on, but I can't show you anything, implying he had been too far and on discovering that all he was capable of despite Ward. She had mentioned this room, Monsieur's apartment, several times. His massive wealth was before. He could not imagine what could be so interesting about it, but by distinguishing wool from now he was dying to see it and insisted she show it to him. If you promise cotton, supervising the to be good, she replied, her eyes widening. Through the darkness of the setting up of a loom, or debating the virtues of a house, she led him into the room, which, to his delight, was a kind of particular yarn, with a plea of pleasure. There were mirrors on the walls, trompe l'oeil paintings, spinner-woman, she evoking a forest scene, even a dark grotto, and a garlanded statue of Eros. Resolved that as far as it lay within her power, she, overwhelmed by the mood of the place, the young man quickly resumed, would have nothing what he had started in the pavilion, and would have lost all track of time whatsoever to do with his if a servant had not rushed in and warned them that it was getting light. Beastly caresses. Moreover, she was determined to seek outside. Monsieur would soon be up. Her pleasure elsewhere, in they quickly separated. Later that day, as the young man prepared to the company of one who leave, his hostess said, "Goodbye, Monsieur. I owe you so many pleasures." Seemed more worthy of her affection, and so it was that, but I have paid you with a beautiful dream. Now your love summons you. She fell deeply in love with to return. Don't give the Countess cause to quarrel with me. Reflect an extremely eligible man on his experience on the way back. He could not figure out what it in his middle 30s and meant. He had the vague sensation of having been used, but the pleasures were never a day passed without her having set eyes he remembered outweighed his doubts. Upon him, she was restless for the whole of the following night. However, the gentleman interpretation. Madame de T. is a character, in the 18th century, suspected nothing of all. Libertine, short story, No Tomorrow, by Vivant Denon. The young man is this, and took no notice of the story's narrator. Although fictional, Madame's techniques were clearly her, and for her part, being very cautious, she would based on those of several well-known libertines of the time, masters of not venture to declare her the game of seduction. And the most dangerous of their weapons was love by dispatching insinuation, the means by which Madame cast her spell on the young man, maid-servant, or writing him making him seem the aggressor, giving her the night of pleasure she desired, master the art of insinuation, 215 and safeguarding her guiltless reputation, all in one stroke. After all, he was a letter, full fear of the one who initiated physical contact, or so it seemed. In truth, she was the dangers that this might entail. But having one in control, planting precisely the ideas in his mind that she wanted. That perceived that he was on first physical encounter in the carriage, for instance, that she had set up by very friendly terms with her inviting him closer. She later rebuked him for being forward, but what Lynn certain priest, a rotund, geared in his mind was the excitement of the moment. Her talk of the uncouth individual, who was nevertheless regarded countess, made him confused and guilty. But then she hinted that his lover as an outstandingly able was unfaithful, planting a different seed in his mind, anger, and the desire for Fryer on account of his very revenge. Then she asked him to forget what she had said and forgive her saintly way of life. She calculated that this fellow for saying it. A key insinuating tactic. I am asking you to forget what I have would serve as an ideal go said, but I know you cannot. The thought will remain in your mind. Between for her and the vote this way, it was inevitable he would grab her in the pavilion. She sev man she loved. And so, after reflecting on the eerie times mentioned the room in the chateau, of course he insisted on strategy she would adopt, going there. She enveloped the evening in an air of ambiguity. Even as she paid a visit, and words, if you promise to be good, could be read several ways. The young appropriate hour of the man's head and heart were inflamed with all of the feelings, discontent, to the church where he was to be found, and confusion, desire, that she had indirectly instilled in him. Having sought him out, she particularly in the early phases of a seduction, learned to make everything asked him whether he you say and do a kind of insinuation. Insinuate doubt with a comment here would agree to confess her. Since he could tell at and there about other people in the victim's life, making the victim feel glance that she was a lady vulnerable. Slight physical contact insinuates desire, as does a fleeting but of quality, the Fry gladly memorable look, or an unusually warm tone of voice, both for the briefest heard her confession, and when she had got to the of moments. A passing comment suggests that something about the victim end of it, she continued as interests you, but keep it subtle, your words revealing a possibility, creating a follows, farther, as I doubt. You are planting seeds that will take root in the weeks to come. Shall explain to you presently, there is a certain when you are not there, your targets will fantasize about the ideas you have matter about which I am stirred up, and brood upon the doubts. They are slowly being led into your compelled to seek your web, unaware that you are in control. How can they resist or become of advice and assistance? Offensive if they cannot even see what is happening. Having already told you my name, I feel sure you will know my family, and what distinguishes a suggestion from other kinds of psy my husband. He loves me kaikal influence, such as a command or the giving of a piece more dearly than life itself, and since he is enormously of information, or instruction, is that in the case of a sug rich, he never has the jest eye on an idea, is aroused in another person's brain, which slightest difficulty, or is not examined in regard to its origin, but is accepted just hesitation, in supplying me as though it had arisen spontaneously in that brain. With every single object for which I display a yearning. Sigmund Freud consequently, my love for him is quite unbounded, and if my mere thoughts, to say nothing of my actual keys to seduction behavior, were to run contrary to his wishes and his honor, I would be more you cannot pass through life without in one way or another trying to deserving of hellfire than persuade people of something. Take the direct route, saying exactly the wickedest woman who what you want, and your honesty may make you feel good, but you are ever lived. Now, there is probably not getting anywhere. People have their own sets of ideas, which a certain person, of respectable outward are hardened into stone by habit, your words, entering their minds, Comp. 216, The Art of Seduction appearance, who unless I peat with the thousands of preconceived notions that are already there and are mistaken is a close get nowhere. Besides, people resent your attempt to persuade them, as if acquaintance of yours. They were incapable of deciding by themselves, as if you knew better. Really couldn't say what his name is, but he is tall and consider instead the power of insinuation and suggestion. It requires some handsome, his clothes are patience and art, but the results are more than worth it. Brown and elegantly cut, the way insinuation works is simple, disguised in a banal remark or and, possibly, because he is unaware of my resolute counter, a hint is dropped. It is about some emotional issue, a possible nature, he appears to have pleasure not yet attained, a lack of excitement in a person's life. The hint laid siege to me. He turns registers in the back of the target's mind, a subtle stab at his or her insecure eye up infallibly whenever I either look out of my ties, its source is quickly forgotten. It is too subtle to be memorable at the window or stand at the time, and later, when it takes root and grows, it seems to have emerged front door, or leave the naturally from the target's own mind, as if it was there all along. Insinuation House, and I am surprised, lets you bypass people's natural resistance, for they seem to be listening only in fact, that he is not here now. Needless to say, I am to what has originated in themselves. It is a language on its own, communi very upset about all this, cating directly with the unconscious. No seducer, no persuader, can hope, because his sort of conduct to succeed without mastering the language and art of insinuation. Frequently gives an honest woman a bad name. Even a strange man once arrived at the court of Louis XV. No one knew though she is quite anything about him, and his accent and age were unplaceable. He called innocent. Father himself Count Saint-Germain. He was obviously wealthy, all kinds of gems love of God, therefore, I implore you to speak to and diamonds glittered on his jacket, his sleeves, his shoes, his fingers. He him severely and persuade could play the violin to perfection, paint magnificently. But the most in him to refrain from his toxicating thing about him was his conversation. Importunities. There are in truth, the Count was the greatest charlatan of the 18th, plenty of other women, who doubtless find this sort of century, a man who had mastered the art of insinuation. As he spoke, a thing amusing, and who word here and there would slip out, a vague allusion to the philosophers will enjoy being ogled and stone, which turned base metal into gold, or to the elixir of life. He did not spied upon by him, but I personally have no say he possessed these things, but he made you associate him with their inclination for it powers. Had he simply claimed to have them, no one would have believed whatsoever, and I find his him and people would have turned away. The Count might refer to a man behavior exceedingly disagreeable, and who had died 40 years earlier, as if he had known him personally. Had having reached the end of this been so, the Count would have had to be in his 80s, although he has speech, the lady bowed looked to be in his 40s. He mentioned the elixir of life. He seemed so her head as though she young were going to burst into tears. The Reverend Friar, the key to the Count's words was vagueness. He always dropped his realized immediately, who hints into a lively conversation, grace notes in an ongoing melody. Only it was to whom she was later would people reflect on what he had said. After a while, people started referring, and having warmly commended her to come to him, inquiring about the philosopher's stone and the elixir of purity of mind. He life, not realizing that it was he who had planted these ideas in their minds. Promised to take all. Remember, to sow a seductive idea you must engage people's imaginations, necessary steps to ensure that the fellow cease to their fantasies, their deepest yearnings. What sets the wheels spinning is annoy her. Shortly suggesting things that people already want to hear, the possibility of plea afterward, the gentleman ensure, wealth, health, adventure. In the end, these good things turn out to be question paid one of his regular visits to the precisely what you seem to offer them. They will come to you as if on Reverend Friar, and after their own, unaware that you insinuated the idea in their heads. They had conversed together in 1807. Napoleon Bonaparte decided it was critical for him to win for a while on General the Russian Tsar Alexander I to his side. He wanted two things out of the master the art of insinuation, 217 Tsar. A peace treaty, in which they agreed to carve up Europe and the mid-topics. The friar drew him to Dal East, and a marriage alliance, in which he would divorce his wife one side and reproached him in a very kindly sort of Josephine and marry into the Tsar's family. Instead of proposing these way for the amorous things directly, Napoleon decided to seduce the Tsar. Using polite social glances which, as the lady encounters and friendly conversations as his battlefields, he went to work. Had given him to an apparent slip of the tongue revealed that Josephine could not Berchel understand. He believed him to be casting in her dren. Napoleon quickly changed the subject. A comment here and there direction not seemed to suggest a linking of the destinies of France and Russia. Just be unnaturally, the gentleman for they were to part one evening, he talked of his desire for children, was amazed, for he had never so much as looked at sighed sadly, then excused himself for bed, leaving the Tsar to sleep on the lady and it was very this. He escorted the Tsar to a play on the themes of glory, honor, and seldom that he passed by empire. Now, in later conversations, he could disguise his insinuations in her house. The gentleman, being rather the cover of discussing the play. Within a few weeks, the Tsar was more perceptive than the speaking to his ministers of a marriage alliance and a treaty with France as Reverend Friar, was not if they were his own ideas. Exactly slow to appreciate the lady's cleverness, and slips of the tongue, apparently inadvertent, sleep on it comments, putting on a somewhat luring references, statements for which you quickly apologize. All of these sheepish expression, he have immense insinuating power. They get under people's skin like a poi promised not to bother her son, and take on a life of their own. The key to succeeding with you're in any more. But after leaving the friar, he made his way insinuations is to make them when your targets are at their most relaxed, or toward the house of the distracted, so that they are not aware of what is happening. Polite banter is lady, who was keeping often the perfect front for this. People are thinking about what they will say continuous vigil at a tiny little window, so that she next, or are absorbed in their own thoughts. Your insinuations will barely would see him if he register, which is how you want it. Happened to pass by. In one of his early campaigns, John F. Kennedy addressed a group of and from that day forward, proceeding with veterans. Kennedy's brave exploits during World War II, the PT.109 insight, the maximum prudence Dent had made him a war hero, were known to all, but in the speech, he and conveying the talked of the other men on the boat, never mentioning himself. He knew, impression that he was engaged in some other however, that what he had done was on everyone's mind, because in fact he business entirely, he became had put it there. Not only did his silence on the subject make them think of a regular visitor to the it on their own, it made Kennedy seem humble and modest, qualities that neighborhood go well with heroism. In Seduction, as the French courtesan Ninon de Giovanni Boccaccio, the L'Enclos advised, it is better not to talk about your love for a person. Let Decameron, translated by H. MCWILLIAM, your target read it in your manner. Your silence on the subject will have more insinuating power than if you had addressed it directly. Not only words insinuate, pay attention to gestures and looks. Madame glances are the heavy recamia's favorite technique, was to keep her words banal, and the look in artillery of the flirt, her eyes enticing. The flow of conversation would keep men from thinking everything can be conveyed too deeply about these occasional looks, but they would be haunted by in a look, yet that look can always be denied, for it them. Lord Byron had his famous underlook, while everyone was cannot be quoted word for cussing some uninteresting subject, he would seem to hang his head, but word. Then a young woman, the target, would see him glancing upward at her, his Stendhal, quoted iron head still tilted. It was a look that seemed dangerous, challenging, but also Richard Davenport Hines, ambiguous, many women were hooked by it. The face speaks its own lan vice, an anthology guage. We are used to trying to read people's faces, which are often better indicators of their feelings than what they say, which is so easy to control. 218 The Art of Seduction. Since people are always reading your looks, use them to transmit the insinuating signals you choose. Finally, the reason insinuation works so well is not just that it bypasses people's natural resistance. It is also the language of pleasure. There is too little mystery in the world. Too many people say exactly what they feel or want. We yearn for something enigmatic, for something to feed our fantasies. Because of the lack of suggestion and ambiguity in daily life, the person who uses them suddenly seems to have something alluring and full of promise. It is a kind of titillating game. What is this person up to? What does he or she mean? Hints, suggestions, and insinuations create a seductive atmosphere, signaling that their victim is no longer involved in the routines of daily life, but has entered another realm. Symbol, the seed. The soil is carefully prepared. The seeds are planted months in advance. Once they are in the ground, no one knows what hand threw them there. They are part of the earth. Disguise your manipulations by planting seeds that take root on their own. Reversal. The danger in insinuation is that when you leave things ambiguous, your target may misread them. There are moments, particularly later on in a seduction, when it is best to communicate your idea directly, particularly once you know the target will welcome it. Casanova often played things that way. When he could sense that a woman desired him and needed little preparation, he would use a direct, sincere, gushing comment to go straight to her head like a drug and make her fall under his spell. When the rake and writer Gabriele D'Annunzio met a woman he desired, he rarely delayed. Flattery flowed from his mouth and pen. He would charm with his sincerity. Sincerity can be feigned, and is just one stratagem among others. This only works, however, when you sense that the target is easily yours. If not, the defenses and suspicions you raise by direct attack will make your seduction impossible. When in doubt, indirection is the better route. Enter their spirit. Most people are locked in their own worlds, making them stubborn and hard to persuade. The way to lure them out of their shell and set up your seduction is to enter their spirit. Play by their rules, enjoy what they enjoy, adapt yourself to their moods. In doing so, you will stroke their deep-rooted narcissism and lower their defenses. Hypnotized by the mirror image you present, they will open up, becoming vulnerable to your subtle influence. Soon you can shift the dynamic. Once you have entered their spirit, you can make them enter yours, at a point when it is too late to turn back. Indulge your target's every mood and whim, giving them nothing to react against or resist. The indulgent strategy. In October of 1961, the American journalist Cindy Adams was granted an exclusive interview with President Sukarno of Indonesia. It was a remarkable coup, for Adams was a little-known journalist at the time, while Sukarno was a world figure in the midst of a crisis. A leader of the fight for Indonesia's independence, he had been the country's president since 1949, when the Dutch finally gave up the colony. By the early 1960s, his daring foreign policy had made him hated in the United States, some calling him "you're anxious to keep your mistress." Convinced the Hitler of Asia. She's knocked you all. Of Adams decided that in the interests of a lively interview, she would not heap with her stunningly cowed or overawed by Sukarno, and she began the conversation by jock looks. If it's purple she's wearing, praise purple, with him. To her pleasant surprise, her ice-breaking tactic seemed to when she's in a silk dress, work. Sukarno warmed up to her. He let the interview run well over and say silk suits her best of hour, and when it was over he loaded her with gifts. Her success was all. Admire her singing voice, her gestures markable enough, but even more so were the friendly letters she began as she dances, cry to receive from Sukarno after she and her husband had returned to New Encore, when she stops. York. A few years later, he proposed that she collaborate with him on his You Can Even Praise / her autobiography. Performance in bed, her talent for lovemaking / Adams, who was used to doing puff pieces on third-rate celebrities, was spell out what turned you confused. She knew Sukarno had a reputation as a devilish Don Juan, Laurent. / though she may grand seductor, the French called him. He had had 4 wives and hundreds show fiercer in action than any Medusa / her lover of conquests. He was handsome, and obviously he was attracted to her, but will always describe her as why choose her for this prestigious task. Perhaps his libido was too kind / and gentle. But fool for him to care about such things. Nevertheless, it was an offer she could take care not to give yourself away while / not refuse. Making such tongue in January of 1964, Adams returned to Indonesia. Her strategy, she had cheek compliments, don't decided, would stay the same. She would be the brassy, straight-talking lady allow / your expression to ruin the message. Arts, who had seemed to charm Sukarno 3 years earlier. During her first most effective / interview with him for the book, she complained in rather strong terms concealed detection about the rooms she had been given as lodgings. As if he were her secret, discredits you for good. Terry, she dictated a letter to him, which he was to sign, detailing the special, OVID, the art of love, treatment she was to be given by one and all. To her amazement, he translated by Peter Greene fully copied out the letter and signed it. Next on Adams's schedule was a tour of Indonesia to interview people who had known Sukarno in his youth. So she complained to him about the little boy, or girl, seeks to fascinate his or her plane she had to fly on, which she said was unsafe. I tell you what, honey, parents. In Oriental she told him, I think you should give me my own plane. Okay, he in literature, imitation, is 222, the Art of Seduction reckoned to be one of the sweared, apparently somewhat abashed. One, however, was not enough, she ways of attracting. The went on, she required several planes, and a helicopter, and her own Sanskrit texts, for sonal pilot, a good one. He agreed to everything. The leader of Indonesia example, give an important part to the trick of the seemed to be not just intimidated by Adams, but totally under her spell. He woman copying the dress, praised her intelligence and wit. At one point he confided, do you know expressions, and speech of why I'm doing this biography? Only because of you, that's why. He her beloved. This kind of mimetic drama is urged on paid attention to her clothes, complimenting her outfits, noticing any the woman who, being change in them. He was more like a fawning suitor than the Hitler of unable to unite with her Aisha, beloved, imitates him to distract his thoughts. Inevitably, of course, he made passes at her. She was an attractive the child too, using the woman. First there was the hand on top of her hand, then a stolen kiss. She devices of imitating spurned him every time, making it clear she was happily married, but she attitudes, dress, and so on, was worried. If all he had wanted was an affair, the whole book deal could seeks to fascinate, until a magical intention, the fall apart. Once again, though, her straightforward strategy seemed the father or mother and thus right one. Surprisingly, he backed down without anger or resentment. He too distracted its thoughts, promised that his affection for her would remain platonic. She had to admit identification means that one is abandoning and not that he was not at all what she had expected, or what had been described to abandoning amorous her. Perhaps he liked being dominated by a woman. Desires. It is a law which the interviews continued for several months, and she noticed slight the child uses to capture his parents and which, it must changes in him. She still addressed him familiarly, spicing the conversation be admitted, they fall for. With brazen comments, but now he returned them, delighting in this kind. The same is true for the of saucy banter. He assumed the same lively mood that she strategically masses, who imitate their forced on herself. At first he had dressed in military uniform, or in his little leader, bear his name and repeat his gestures. They Ian suits. Now he dressed casually, even going barefoot, conforming to the bow to him, but at the casual style of their relationship. One night he remarked that he liked the same time they are color of her hair. It was Clairol, blue-black, she explained. He wanted to unconsciously baiting a trap to hold him. Great have the same color, she had to bring him a bottle. She did as he asked, ceremonies and imagining he was joking, but a few days later he requested her presence at demonstrations are just as the palace to dye his hair for him. She did so, and now they had the exact much occasions when the multitudes charm the same hair color. Leader as vice versa. The book, Sukarno, an autobiography as told to Cindy Adams, was pub. Serge Moscovici, The Age-Lished in 1965. To American readers' surprise, Sukarno came across as Re-of the crowd, translated by remarkably charming and lovable, which was indeed how Adams described J. C. W. H. I. T. E. H. O. U. S. E. him to one and all. If anyone argued, she would say that they did not know him the way she did. Sukarno was well pleased, and had the book distributed far and wide. It helped gain sympathy for him in Indonesia, where he my sixth brother, he who was now being threatened with a military coup. And Sukarno was not had both his lips cut off. Surprised, he had known all along that Adams would do a far better job Prince of the Faithful, is called Shakashik. In his with his memoirs than any serious journalist. Youth he was very poor. One day, as he was begging in the streets of interpretation. Who was seducing whom? It was Sukarno who was doing Baghdad. He passed by a splendid mansion, at the seducing, and his seduction of Adams followed a classical sequence. Gates of which stood and first, he chose the right victim. An experienced journalist would have re-impressive array of sisted the law of a personal relationship with the subject, and a man would attendance. Upon inquiry, my brother was informed have been less susceptible to his charm. And so he picked a woman, and entered their spirit, 223 one, whose journalistic experience lay elsewhere. At his first meeting with that the house belonged to Adams, he sent mixed signals. He was friendly to her, but hinted at another a member of the wealthy and powerful Barmecide kind of interest as well. Then, having insinuated a doubt in her mind, per family. Shakashik haps he just wants an affair, he proceeded to mirror her. He indulged her approached the door every mood, retreating every time she complained. Indulging a person is a keeper's and solicited arms. Form of entering their spirit, letting them dominate for the time being. Go in, they said, and our master will give perhaps Sukarno's passes at Adams showed his uncontrollable libido at you all that you desire. Work, or perhaps they were more cunning. He had a reputation as a don. My brother entered the Juan, failing to make a pass at her would have hurt her feelings. Women lofty vestibule and proceeded to a spacious, are often less offended at being found attractive than one imagines, and marble-paved hall. Hung Sukarno was clever enough to have given each of his 4 wives the with tapestry and impression that she was his favorite. The pass out of the way, he moved fur overlooking a beautiful garden. He stood there into her spirit, taking on her casual air, even slightly feminizing himself bewildered for a moment, by adopting her hair color. The result was that she decided he was not what not knowing where to turn, she had expected or feared him to be. He was not in the least threatening, his steps, and then advanced to the far end of an after all, she was the one in control. What Adams failed to realize was the hall. There, among the that once her defenses were lowered, she was oblivious to how deeply he cushions, reclined had engaged her emotions. She had not charmed him, he had charmed her. Handsome old man with a what he wanted all along was what he got. A personal memoir written by a long beard, whom my brother recognized at once sympathetic foreigner, who gave the world a rather engaging portrait of her as the master of the house. man of whom many were suspicious. What can I do for you? Of all the seductive tactics, entering someone's spirit is perhaps the my friend, asked the old man, as he rose to welcome most devilish of all. It gives your victims the feeling that they are seducing my brother. The fact that you are indulging them, imitating them, entering their Shakashik replied that he spirit, suggests that you are under their spell. You are not a dangerous was a hungry beggar, the old man expressed the dukkha to be wary of, but someone compliant and unthreatening. The atten deepest compassion and tie on you pay to them is intoxicating, since you are mirroring them, rent his fine robes, crying, everything they see and hear from you reflects their own ego and tastes. Is it possible that there should be a man as hungry? What a boost to their vanity. All this sets up the seduction, the series of as yourself in a city where maneuvers that will turn the dynamic around. Once their defenses are down, I am living. It is, indeed, they are open to your subtle influence. Soon you will begin to take over the disgrace that I cannot dance, and without even noticing the shift, they will find themselves enter endure. Then he comforted my brother, in your spirit. This is the endgame. Adding, I insist that you stay with me and partake. Women are not at their ease except with those who take of my dinner. With this the master of the house chances with them, and enter into their spirit. Clapped his hands and, Ninondellenclos, called out to one of the slaves, bring in the basin and ewer. Then he said to my brother, come keys to seduction forward, my friend, and wash your hands. Shakashik rose to do so. One of the great sources of frustration in our lives is other people's, but saw neither ewer nor stubbornness. How hard it is to reach them, to make them see things basin. He was bewildered our way. We often have the impression that when they seem to be listening to see his host make to us, and apparently agreeing with us, it is all superficial. The moment we gestures, as though he were pouring water on his hands are gone, they revert to their own ideas. We spend our lives butting up 224, the art of seduction, from an invisible vessel, and against people, as if they were stone walls. But instead of complaining then drying them with an about how misunderstood, or ignored you are, why not try something invisible towel? When he farent, instead of seeing other people as spiteful or indifferent, instead of finished, the host called out to his attendants, bring trying to figure out why they act the way they do, look at them through in the table. Numerous the eyes of the seducer. The way to lure people out of their natural and servants hurried in and out tractability, and self-obsession, is to enter their spirit. Of the hall, as though they were preparing for a meal. All of us are narcissists. When we were children our narcissism was my brother could still see physical, we were interested in our own image, our own body, as if it were nothing. Yet his host a separate being. As we grow older, our narcissism grows more psychology invited him to sit at the cowl, we become absorbed in our own tastes, opinions, experiences. A hard imaginary table, saying, honor me by eating of shell forms around us. Paradoxically, the way to entice people out of this meat. The old man's shell is to become more like them, in fact a kind of mirror image of them. Moved his hands about as you do not have to spend days studying their minds. Simply conform to though he were touching invisible dishes, and also their moods, adapt to their tastes, play along with whatever they send you moved his jaws and lips as way. In doing so you will lower their natural defensiveness. Their sense of though he were chewing. Self-esteem does not feel threatened by your strangeness or different habits. Then said he to Shakashik, Eat your fill, people truly love themselves, but what they love most of all is to see them my friend, for you must be ideas and tastes reflected in another person. This validates them. They're half-famished. My brother habitual insecurity vanishes. Hypnotized by their mirror image, they relax. Began to move his jaws, to now that their inner wall has crumbled, you can slowly draw them out, chew and swallow, as though he were eating, and eventually turn the dynamic around. Once they are open to you, it be while the old man still comes easy to infect them with your own moods and heat. Entering the coaxed him, saying, eat, other person's spirit is a kind of hypnosis. It is the most insidious and efficacious, my friend, and note the excellence of this bread and tie form of persuasion known to man. Its whiteness. This in the 18th century Chinese novel The Dream of the Red Cham Man, thought Shikashik, all the young girls in the prosperous house of Kia are in love with the must be fond of practical jokes. So he said, it is, rakish Pao Yu. He is certainly handsome, but what makes him irresistible is, sir, the whitest bread. I have his uncanny ability to enter a young girl's spirit. Pao Yu has spent his youth ever seen, and I have never round girls, whose company he has always preferred. As a result, he never tasted the like in all my life. This bread, said, comes over as threatening and aggressive. He is granted entry to girls. The host was baked by a rooms, they see him everywhere, and the more they see him the more they slave girl whom I bought fall under his spell. It is not that Pao Yu is feminine, he remains a man, but for 500 dinars, one who can be more or less masculine as the situation requires. His family then he called out to one of his slaves, bring in the iarity, with young girls allows him the flexibility to enter their spirit. Meat pudding, and let there this is a great advantage. The difference between the sexes is what be plenty of fat in it, makes love and seduction possible, but it also involves an element of fear. Thereupon the host moved his fingers as though in distrust. A woman may fear male aggression and violence. A man is to pick up a morsel from an often unable to enter a woman's spirit, and so he remains strange and imaginary dish, and threatening. The greatest seducers in history, from Casanova to John F., popped the invisible delicacy into my brother's Kennedy, grew up surrounded by women, and had a touch of femininity mouth. The old man themselves. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, in his novel The Seducers continued to enlarge upon diary, recommends spending more time with the opposite sex, getting to the excellences of the know the enemy and its weaknesses, so that you can turn this knowledge various dishes, while my brother became so to your advantage. Ravenously hungry that he Ninan de l'Enclos, one of the greatest seductresses who ever lived, would have willingly died definite masculine qualities. She could impress a man, with her intense enter their spirit, 225 philosophical keenness, and charm him by seeming to share his interest in for a crust of barley bread. Politics and warfare. Many men first formed deep friendships with her. Have you ever tasted anything more delicious, only to later fall madly in love? The masculine in a woman is as soothing to went on the old man, men as the feminine in a man is to women. To a man, a woman strange, than the spices in these nests can create frustration, and even hostility. He may be lured into a sexual dishes. Never encounter, but a longer-lasting spell cannot be created without an acom indeed, replied Shikashik. Eat paining mental seduction. The key is to enter his spirit. Men are often heartily, then, said is seduced by the masculine element in a woman's behavior or character. Host, and do not be in the novel Clarissa, 1748, by Samuel Richardson, the young and ill-ashamed. I thank you, sir, answered vowed Clarissa Harlowe, is being courted by the notorious rake Lovelace. Shikashik, but I have Clarissa knows Lovelace's reputation, but for the most part he has not acted already eaten my fill. As she would expect, he is polite, seems a little sad and confused. At one presently, however, the old man clapped his hands point she finds out that he has done a most noble and charitable deed to her again and cried, bring in family in distress, giving the father money, helping the man's daughter get the wine. Sir, married, giving them wholesome advice. At last Lovelace confesses to said Shikashik, your generosity overwhelms Clarissa what she has suspected, he wants to repent, to change his ways. Here's me. He lifted the invisible letters to her are emotional, almost religious in their passion. Perhaps she cupped to his lips, and maid will be the one to lead him to righteousness. But of course Lovelace has as if to drain it at one gulp. Trapped her. He is using the seducer's tactic of mirroring her tastes. In this health and joy to you, exclaimed the old case her spirituality. Once she lets her guard down, once she believes she man, as he pretended to can reform him, she is doomed. Now he can slowly insinuate his own spirit, pour himself some wine into his letters and encounters with her. Remember, the operative word is and drink it off. He handed another cup to his spirit, and that is often exactly where to take aim. By seeming to mirror guest, and they both someone's spiritual values, you can seem to establish a deep-rooted harmony continued to act in this between the two of you, which can then be transferred to the physical fashion, until Shakashik, feigning himself drunk, plain, began to roll his head from when Josephine Baker moved to Paris, in 1925, as part of an all-black side-to-side. Then, taking review, her exoticism made her an overnight sensation. But the French are his bounteous host, notoriously fickle, and Baker sensed that their interest in her would quickly unawares. He suddenly raised his arm so high that passed to someone else. To seduce them for good, she entered their spirit. She the white of his armpit learned French, and began to sing in it. She started dressing and acting as it could be seen, and dealt stylish French lady, as if to say that she preferred the French way of life to him, a blow on the neck which made the hall echo the American. Countries are like people, they have vast insecurities and with the sound. And this they feel threatened by other customs. It is often quite seductive to a people he followed by a second to see an outsider adopting their ways. Benjamin Disraeli was born and blow. The old man rose in anger and cried, what lived all his life in England, but he was Jewish by birth, and had exotic fee, are you doing, vile tueurs? The provincial English considered him an outsider. Yet he was more creature. Sir, replied English in his manners and tastes than many an Englishman, and this was my brother. You have received your humble slave part of his charm, which he proved by becoming the leader of the Konza, into your house and loaded vative party. Should you be an outsider, as most of us ultimately are, turn him with your generosity, it to advantage. Play on your alien nature, in such a way, as to show that you have fed him with the group how deeply you prefer their tastes and customs to your own. Choicest food and quenched his thirst with the most in 1752, the notorious rake Saltykov determined to be the first man in potent wines. Alas, he the Russian court to seduce the 23-year-old Grand Duchess, that became drunk, and forgot future Empress Catherine the Great. He knew that she was lonely, her who's his manners. But you are so noble, sir, that you will band Peter ignored her, as did many of the other courtiers. And yet the Art 2:26, the Art of Seduction, surely pardon his offense. Stakes were immense, she was spied on day and night. Still, Saltykov man, when he heard these aged to befriend the young woman, and to enter her all too small circle. Words, the old man burst he finally got her alone, and made it clear to her how well he understood out laughing and said, for a long time, I have her loneliness, how deeply he disliked her husband, and how much he jested with all types of shared her interest in the new ideas that were sweeping Europe. Soon he men, but no one has ever found himself able to arrange further meetings, where he gave her the had the patience, or the wit to enter into my humors as pression that when he was with her, nothing else in the world mattered. You have done. Now, Catherine fell deeply in love with him, and he did in fact become her first, therefore, I pardon you, lover. Saltykov had entered her spirit. And ask you in truth to cat and drink with me, and to when you mirror people, you focus intense attention on them. They he my companion as long will sense the effort you are making, and will find it flattering. Obviously as I live. Then the old you have chosen them, separating them out from the rest. There seems to man ordered his attendants be nothing else in your life but them, their moods, their tastes, their spirit. To serve all the dishes which they had consumed, the more you focus on them, the deeper the spell you produce, and the in fancy, and when he intoxicating effect you have on their vanity. My brother had eaten there, many of us have difficulty reconciling the person we are right now, fill they repaired to the drinking chamber, where with the person we want to be. We are disappointed that we have compro beautiful young women meased our youthful ideals, and we still imagine ourselves as that person sang and made music. The who had so much promise, but whom circumstances prevented from real old Barmecide gave Shikashik a robe of honor ising it. When you are mirroring someone, do not stop at the person they and made him his constant have become. Enter the spirit of that ideal person they wanted to be. This companion is how the French writer Chateaubriand managed to become a great The Tale of Shikashik, Dukkha, despite his physical ugliness. When he was growing up, in the latter Barber's sixth brother, 18th century, Romanticism was coming into fashion, and many tales from the 1001 Nights, translated young women felt deeply oppressed by the lack of romance in their lives. By Dorwood Chateaubriand would reawaken the fantasy they had had as young girls of being swept off their feet, of fulfilling romantic ideals. This form of entering another's spirit is perhaps the most effective kind, because it makes people feel better about themselves. In your presence, they live the life of the person they had wanted to be, a great lover, a romantic hero, whatever it is. Discover those crushed ideals and mirror them, bringing them back to life by reflecting them back to your target. Few can resist such a lure. Symbol, the hunter's mirror. The lark is a savory bird, but difficult to catch. In the field, the hunter places a mirror on a stand. The lark lands in front of the glass, steps back and forth, entranced by its own moving image, and by the imitative mating dance it sees performed before its eyes. Hypnotized, the bird loses all sense of its surroundings, until the hunter's net traps it against the mirror. Enter their spirit. 227 Reversal. This desire for a double of the other sex that resembles us absolutely. While still in 1897 in Berlin, the poet Rainer Maria Rilke, whose reputation would being other, for a magical later circle the world, met Lou Andrea Salome, the Russian-born writer-creature, who is ourself and beauty, who was notorious for having broken Nietzsche's heart. She, while possessing was the darling of Berlin intellectuals, and although Rilke was 22 advantage over all our imaginings of an, and she was 36, he fell head over heels in love with her. He flooded autonomous existence her with love letters, which showed that he had read all her books, and we find traces of it and even knew her tastes intimately. The two became friends. Soon she was editing the most banal circumstances of love in his poetry, and he hung on her every word. The attraction linked to any Salome was flattered by Rilke's mirroring of her spirit, enchanted by change, any disguise, as in the intense attention he paid her and the spiritual communion they began, the importance of unison and the repetition of self to develop. She became his lover. But she was worried about his future, the other. The great was difficult to make a living as a poet, and she encouraged him to learn the implacable amorous her native language, Russian, and become a translator. He followed her passions are all linked to the fact that a being vice so avidly that within months he could speak Russian. They visited imagines he sees his most Russia together, and Rilke was overwhelmed by what he saw, the P's secret self spying upon him, ants, the folk customs, the art, the architecture. Back in Berlin, he turned behind the curtain of his rooms into a kind of shrine to Russia, and started wearing Russian P's another's eyes. Ant blouses and peppering his conversation with Russian phrases. Now the Robert Musil, quoted in Denis de Rougemont, love charm of his mirroring soon wore off. At first Salome had been flattered, declared, translated by, that he shared her interests so intensely, but now she saw this as something Richard Howard else. He seemed to have no real identity. He had become dependent on her for his own self-esteem. It was all so slavish. In 1899, much to his horror, she broke off the relationship. The lesson is simple: your entry into a person's spirit must be a tactic, a way to bring him or her under your spell. You cannot be simply a sponge, soaking up the other person's moods. Mirror them for too long, and they will see through you and be repelled by you. Beneath the similarity to them that you make them see, you must have a strong underlying sense of your own identity. When the time comes, you will want to lead them into your spirit. You cannot live on their turf. Never take mirroring too far, then. It is only useful in the first phase of a seduction. At some point the dynamic must be reversed. Create temptation. Lure the target deep into your seduction, by creating the proper temptation, a glimpse of the pleasures to come. As the serpent tempted Eve with the promise of forbidden knowledge, you must awaken a desire in your targets that they cannot control. Find that weakness of theirs, that fantasy that has yet to be realized, and hint that you can lead them toward it. It could be wealth, it could be adventure, it could be forbidden and guilty pleasures. The key is to keep it vague. Dangle the prize before their eyes, postponing satisfaction, and let their minds do the rest. The future seems ripe with possibility. Stimulate a curiosity stronger than the doubts and anxieties that go with it, and they will follow you. The tantalizing object. Sometime in the 1880s, a gentleman named Don Juan de Tudelas was wandering through a park in Madrid, when he saw a woman in her early 20s getting out of a coach, followed by a 2-year-old child and a nursemaid. The young woman was elegantly dressed, but what took Don Juan's breath away was her resemblance to a woman he had known nearly 3 years before. Surely she could not be the same person. The woman he had known, Cristeta Moruela, was a showgirl in a second-rate theatre. For these 2 crimes Tantalus was punished. She had been an orphan and was quite poor. Her circumstances could not with the ruin of his have changed that much. He moved closer, the same beautiful face and kingdom, and after his then he heard her voice. He was so shocked that he had to sit down. It was death by Zeus's own hand, with eternal torment in the indeed the same woman. Company of Ixion, Don Juan was an incorrigible seducer, whose conquests were Inu Sisyphus, Titius, the Mirabell and of every variety. But he remembered his affair with Cristeta Danaides, and others. Now quite clearly, because she had been so young, the most charming girl he hangs, perennially consumed by thirst and had ever met. Who could her husband be? Did he know her past? Mixed than ever. The tree is laden with pears, shining apples, with his confusion was intense desire. She was so young and beautiful. Why sweet figs, ripe olives, and had he given her up so easily? Somehow, even if she was married, he had to pomegranates, which get her back. Dangle against his shoulders, but whenever Don Juan began to frequent the park every day, he saw her a few more reaches for the luscious times. Their eyes met, but she pretended not to notice him. Tracing the fruit, a gust of wind whirls nursemaid during one of her errands, he struck up a conversation with her, them out of his reach, and asked her about her mistress's husband. She told him the man's name, Robert Graves, the Greek was Senor Martinez, and that he was away on an extended business trip. She myths, Volume 2 also told him where Cristeta now lived. Don Juan gave her a note to give to 231-232, The Art of Seduction. Don Juan, Arminta, listen her mistress. Then he strolled by Cristeta's house, a beautiful palace. His to the truth, for are not worst suspicions were confirmed, she had married for money. Women friends of truth. Cristeta refused to see him. He persisted, sending more notes. Finally, a nobleman, heir to the ancient family of the to avoid a scene, she agreed to meet him, just once, in the park. He Tenorios, the conquerors of paired for the meeting carefully. Seducing her again would be a delicate observille. After the king, my oration. But when he saw her coming toward him, in her beautiful clothes, father is the most powerful and considered man at his emotions, and his lust got the better of him. She could only belong to court. By chance I him, never to another man, he told her. Cristeta took offense at this. Obby happened on this road and usually her present circumstances prevented even one more meeting. Still, saw you. Love sometimes beneath her coolness he could sense strong emotions. He begged to see her behaves in a manner that surprises even himself. Again, but she left without promising anything. He sent her more letters, Arminta. I don't know if meanwhile racking his brains trying to piece it all together. Who was this? What you're saying is truth, Señor Martinez. Why would he marry a showgirl? How could Cristeta be all lying rhetoric? I am married to Patricio, wrested away from him. Everybody knows it. How finally Cristeta agreed to meet Don Juan one more time, in the theater. Can the marriage be where he dared not risk a scandal? They took a box, where they could talk. Annulled, even if he abandons me. Don Juan, she reassured him the child was not his. She said he only wanted her now when the marriage is not because she belonged to another, because he could not have her. No, he consummated, whether by said, he had changed, he would do anything to get her back. Disconcert malice or deceit, it can be annulled. Arminta, Ingli, at moments her eyes seemed to be flirting with him. But then you are right. But, God seemed to be about to cry, and rested her head on his shoulder. Only to help me, won't you desert? Get up immediately, as if realizing this was a mistake. This was their last me the moment you have meeting, she said, and quickly fled. Don Juan was beside himself. She was separated me from my husband. Don playing with him, she was a coquette. He had only been claiming to have Juan. Arminta, light of my changed, but perhaps it was true, no woman had ever treated him this way. Eyes, tomorrow you're before. He would never have allowed it. Beautiful feet, will slip into polished silver slippers, with for the next few nights Don Juan slept poorly. All he could think about, buttons of the purest gold. Was Cristeta. He had nightmares about killing her husband, about growing in your alabaster throat old and being alone. It was all too much. He had to leave town. He sent will be imprisoned in beautiful necklaces, on her a goodbye note, and to his amazement, she replied, she wanted to see your fingers, rings set with him, she had something to tell him. By now he was too weak to resist. As amethysts will shine like she had requested, he met her on a bridge at night. This time she made no stars, and from your ear's effort to control herself, yes, she still loved Don Juan, and was ready to run will da Engel Oriental pearls. Arminta, I am yours. Away with him. But he should come to her house tomorrow, in broad day, terso de molina, light, and take her away. There could be no secrecy. The playboy of Seville, beside himself with joy, Don Juan agreed to her demands. The next day translated by Adrian M. He showed up at her palace at the appointed hour, and asked for Senora Schizzano and Oscar Mandll, in Mandel, Martinez. There was no one there by that name, said the woman at the theater of Don Juan door. Don Juan insisted, her name is Cristeta. Ah, Cristeta, the woman said, she lives in the back, with the other tenants. Confused, Don Juan went to the back of the palace. There he thought he saw her son, playing in the street in dirty clothes. But no, he said to himself, it must be some other. Now the serpent was more subtle than any other wild child. He came to Cristeta's door, and instead of her servant, Cristeta herself creature that the Lord opened it. He entered. It was the room of a poor person. Hanging on him God had made. He said provised racks, however, were Cristeta's elegant clothes. As if in a dream, he to the woman, did God say, you shall not cat have sat down, dumbfounded, and listened as Cristeta revealed the truth. Create temptation, 233 She was not married, she had no child. Months after he had left her, any tree of the garden, she had realized that she had been the victim of a consummate seducer. She and the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of still loved Don Juan, but she was determined to turn the tables. Finding out the fruit of the trees of the through a mutual friend that he had returned to Madrid, she took the 5 garden, but God said, 1,000 pesetas he had sent her and bought expensive clothes. She bore, "You shall not eat of the road a neighbor's child," asked the neighbor's cousin to play the child's fruit of the tree, which is in the midst of the garden, nursemaid, and rented a coach, all to create an elaborate fantasy that neither shall you touch it, isted only in his mind. Christetta did not even have to lie, she never actually lest you die. But the said she was married, or had a child. She knew that being unable to have her serpent said to the woman, "You will not die," for would make him want her more than ever. It was the only way to seduce a god knows that when you man like him. Eat of it your eyes will be overwhelmed by the lengths she had gone to, and by the emotions she opened, and you will be like God. Knowing good had so skillfully stirred in him, Don Juan forgave Christetta, and offered to an evil. So when the marry her. To his surprise, and perhaps to his relief, she politely declined. Woman saw that the tree the moment they married, she said, his eyes would wander elsewhere. Was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, only if they stayed as they were could she maintain the upper hand. Don and that the tree was to be Juan had no choice but to agree. Desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband and he ate. Interpretation. Christetta and Don Juan are characters in the novel Dulce y. Genesis 3 verse 1, Old Testament Sabrosa, Sweet and Savory, 1891, by the Spanish writer Jacinto Octavio Picon. Most of Picon's work deals with male seducers and their feminine victims, a subject he studied and knew much about. Abandoned by Don Juan, and reflecting on his nature, Christetta decided to kill two birds with thou strong seducer, one stone. She would get revenge and get him back. But how could she opportunity lure such a man? The fruit once tasted, he no longer wanted it. What came, John Dryden easily to him, or fell into his arms, held no allure for him. What would tempt Don Juan into desiring Christetta again, into pursuing her, was the sense that she was already taken, that she was forbidden fruit. That was his as he listened, Meseta weakness. That was why he pursued virgins and married women. Women experienced such a longing he was not supposed to have. To a man, she reasoned, the grass always to go and stay with these nuns that his whole body seems greener somewhere else. She would make herself that distant, Allah tingled with excitement, foreign object, just out of reach, tantalizing him, stirring up emotions he could it was clear from what he not control. He knew how charming and desirable she had once been to had heard that he should be able to achieve what he him. The idea of possessing her again, and the pleasure he imagined it had in mind realizing would bring, were too much for him. He swallowed the bait. However, that he would get temptation is a twofold process. First, you are coquettish, flirtatious, nowhere by revealing his intentions to Nuto. You stimulate a desire by promising pleasure and distraction from daily life. Replied, HOW write to you at the same time. You make it clear to your targets that they cannot have where to come away from you, at least not right away. You are establishing a barrier, some kind of the nunnery. What sort tension of a life can any man lead when he's surrounded by in days gone by such barriers were easy to create, by taking advantage lot of women. He might as of pre-existing social obstacles of class, race, marriage, religion. Today the well-be living with a pack barriers have to be more psychological. Your heart is taken by someone of devils. Why, 6 times out OJ7 they don't else. You are really not interested in the target. Some secret holds you back, even though their own the timing is bad. You are not good enough for the other person, the other minds. But when they 234, the Art of Seduction, had finished talking, person is not good enough for you, and so on. Conversely, you can choose. Masetto began to consider someone who has a built-in barrier. They are taken, they are not meant to what steps he ought to take want you. These barriers are more subtle than the social or religious variety, so that he could go and stay with them. Knowing but they are barriers nevertheless, and the psychology remains the same. himself to be perfectly. People are perversely excited by what they cannot, or should not have. Capable of carrying out create this inner conflict, there is excitement and interest, but you are duties mentioned by Nuto, unavailable, and you will have them grasping like Tantalus for water. And he had no worries about losing the job on that as with Don Juan and Cristeta. The more you make your targets pursue you, particular score, but he was the more they imagine that it is they who are the aggressors. Your Seduc, afraid lest he should be Tyon, is perfectly disguised. Turned down, because of his youth and his unusually attractive appearance. And the only way to get rid of temptation is to yield to it. So, having rejected Oscar Wilde number of other possible expedients, he eventually thought to himself, the convent is a long way off, keys to seduction, and there's nobody there who knows me. If I can pretend to be dumb, they'll take me on for sure. Clinging firmly to this most of the time, people struggle to maintain security and a sense of balance in their lives. If they were always uprooting themselves in pursuit of every new person or fantasy that passed them by, they could not conjecture. He therefore dressed himself in paupers survive the daily grind. They usually win the struggle, but it does not come rags and slung an axe over easy. The world is full of temptation. They read about people who have his shoulder, and without more than they do, about adventures others are having, about people who telling anyone where he was going, he set out for have found wealth and happiness. The security that they strive for, and that the convent on his they seem to have in their lives, is actually an illusion. It covers up upon arrival, he wandered into stark tension. The courtyard, whereas as a seducer, you can never mistake people's appearance for reality. You luck would have it he came across the steward, and know that their fight to keep order in their lives is exhausting, and that they with the aid of gestures, are gnawed by doubts and regrets. It is hard to be good and virtuous, always such as dumb people use, having to repress the strongest desires. With that knowledge in mind, so he conveyed the impression that he was begging for seduction is easier. What people want is not temptation, temptation happens something to eat, in return every day. What people want is to give in to temptation, to yield. That is the for which he would attend only way to get rid of the tension in their lives. It costs much more to resist to any wood chopping that needed to be done. The temptation than to surrender. Steward gladly provided your task, then, is to create a temptation that is stronger than the daily hymn with something to eat, variety. It has to be focused on them, aimed at them as individuals, at thereafter which he presented him with a pile of logs that weakness. Understand, everyone has a principal weakness, from which Nuto had been unable to stem. Find that childhood insecurity, that lack in their life, and you hold chop. When they're the key to tempting them. Their weakness may be greed, vanity, boredom. Steward had discovered some deeply repressed desire, a hunger for forbidden fruit. They signal it in what an excellent gardener he was. He gestured to little details that elude their conscious control, their style of clothing, and Masetto, asking him offhand comment. Their past, and particularly their past romances, will be whether he would like to littered with clues. Give them a potent temptation, tailored to their weak stay there, and the latter made signs to indicate that and you can make the hope of pleasure that you stir in them figure he was willing to do more prominently than the doubts and anxieties that accompany it. Whatever the steward in 1621, King Philip III of Spain desperately wanted to forge and create temptation, 235 lienza with England by marrying his daughter to the son of the English wanted. Now, one king, James I, James seemed open to the idea, but he stalled for time. When Masetto, Spain's ambassador to the English court, a man called Gondomar, was given happened to he taking a rest after a spell of the task of advancing Philip's plan. He set his sights on the king's favourite, strenuous work. He was the Duke, former Earl of Buckingham. Approached by two very Gondomar knew the Duke's main weakness, vanity. Buckingham hun young nuns, who were out walking in the garden. Geared for the glory and adventure that would add to his fame, He was bored since he gave them with his limited tasks, and he pouted and whined about this. The Amber's impression that he was Sade first flattered him profusely. The Duke was the ablest man in the asleep. They began to stare at him, and the bolder of country, and it was a shame he was given so little to do. Then, he began to the two said to her whisper to him of a great adventure. The Duke, as Gondomar knew, was in companion, if I could favor of the match with the Spanish princess, but these damned marriage be sure that you would keep it a secret. I would negotiations with King James were taking so long, and getting nowhere. Tell you about an idea that what if the Duke were to accompany the King's son, his good friend Prince has often crossed my mind, Charles, to Spain. Of course, this would have to be done in secret, without and one that might well guards or escorts, for the English government and its ministers would never work out to our mutual benefit. Do tell me, sanction such a trip. But that would make it all the more dangerous, and Roe replied the other. You can mantic. Once in Madrid, the prince could throw himself at Princess be quite certain that I Maria's feet, declare his undying love, and carry her back to England in shan't talk about it to anyone. The bold one What a chivalrous deed it would be and all for love. The Duke began to speak more would get all the credit, and it would make his name famous for centuries. Plainly. I wonder, the Duke fell for the idea, and convinced Charles to go along, after said, whether you have ever considered what a much arguing, they also convinced a reluctant King James. The trip was a strict life we have to lead, near disaster, Charles would have had to convert to Catholicism to win and how the only men who Maria, and the marriage never happened, but Gondomar had done his job. Ever dare set foot in this place are the steward, who he did not bribe the Duke with offers of money or power, he aimed at his elderly, and this dumbed the childlike part of him that never grew up. A child has little power to gardener of ours. Yet I have cyst. It wants everything, now, and rarely thinks of the consequences. I often heard it said, by child lies lurking in everyone, a pleasure that was denied them, a desire several of the ladies who have come to visit us, that was repressed. Hit at that point, tempt them with the proper toy, add all other pleasures in the venture, money, fun, and they will slough off their normal adult reason world are mere trifles by ableness. Recognize their weakness by whatever childlike behavior they comparison with the one experienced by a woman reveal in daily life. It is the tip of the iceberg. When she goes with a man. Napoleon Bonaparte was appointed the Supreme General of the French, I have thus been thinking, army in 1796. His commission was to defeat the Austrian forces that had since I have nobody else to hand, that I would like to taken over northern Italy. The obstacles were immense, Napoleon was only discover with the aid of this 26 at the time, the generals below him were envious of his position dumb fellow whether they and doubtful of his abilities. His soldiers were tired, underfed, underpaid, are telling the truth. As it happens, there couldn't be and grumpy. How could he motivate this group to fight the highly experienced better man for the Austrian army? As he prepared to cross the Alps into Italy, Napoleon purpose, because even if he gave a speech to his troops that may have been the turning point in his CA wanted to let the cat out of rear, and in his life. Soldiers, you are half starved and half naked. The gov the bag, he wouldn't be able to. He wouldn't even earnment owes you much, but can do nothing for you. Your patience, your know how to explain, for courage, do you honor, but give you no glory. I will lead you into the you can see for yourself most fertile plains of the world. There you will find flourishing cities, what a mentally retarded, dim-witted hulk of a youth teeming provinces. There you will reap honor, glory, and wealth. The 236, the art of seduction the fellow is. I would be speech had a powerful effect. Days later these same soldiers, after a rough glad to know what you climb over the mountains, gazed down on the Piedmont Valley. Napoleon's think of the idea. Words echoed in their ears, and a ragged, grumbling gang became an dear me, said the other. Don't you realize that we inspired army that would sweep across northern Italy in pursuit of the have promised God to Austrians? Preserve our virginity. Napoleon's use of temptation had two elements. Behind you is a grim pa, she said. We are constantly making him past. Ahead of you is a future of wealth and glory, if you follow me. Integral promises that we never to the temptation strategy is a clear demonstration that the target has nothing keep. What does it mattering to lose and everything to gain? The present offers little hope, the future if we fail to keep this can be full of pleasure and excitement. Remember to keep the future gains one. He can always find other girls to preserve vague, though, and somewhat out of reach. Be too specific, and you will their virginity for him. Disappoint. Make the promise too close at hand, and you will not be able to. Before the time came, postpone satisfaction long enough to get what you want. For them to leave, they had each made repeated trials of the barriers and tensions in temptation, are there to stop people from the dumb fellows riding giving in too easily and too superficially. You want them to struggle, to ability, and later on, when resist, to be anxious. Queen Victoria surely fell in love with her prime. They were busily swapping tales about it all. They minister, Benjamin Disraeli, but there were barriers of religion. He was agreed that it was every bit dark-skinned Jew, class, she of course, was a queen. Social taste, she was as pleasant an experience a paragon of virtue, he a notorious dandy. The relationship was never as they had been led to consummated, but what deliciousness those barriers gave to their daily believe, indeed more so. And from then on, counters, which were full of constant flirtation. Whenever the opportunity, many such social barriers are gone today. So they have to be arose, they whiled away manufactured. It is the only way to put spice into seduction. Taboos of many a pleasant hour in the dumb fellow's arms. Any kind are a source of tension, and they are psychological now, not really one day, however, Aegeus. You are looking for some repression, some secret desire that will companion of theirs make your victim squirm uncomfortably if you hit upon it, but will tempt happened to look out from the window of her cell. Saw them all the more. Search in their past, whatever they seem to fear or flee the goings-on, and drew from might hold the key. It could be a yearning for a mother or father fig the attention of two others you, or a latent homosexual desire. Perhaps you can satisfy that desire by to what was afoot. Having talked the matter over, presenting yourself as a masculine woman or a feminine man. For others between themselves, they at you play the Lolita, or the dad, someone they are not supposed to have, first decided to report for the dark side of their personality. Keep the connection vague, you want pair to the abbess. But then them to reach for something elusive, something that comes out of there they changed their minds, and by common agreement own mind. With the other two, they in London in 1769, Casanova met a young woman named Charpian. Took up shares in Massetto's, she was much younger than he, as beautiful a woman as he had ever holding. And because of various indiscretions, these known, and with a reputation for destroying men. In one of their first 5 was subsequently counters, she told him straight out, that he would fall for her, and she would joined by the remaining ruin him. To everyone's disbelief, Casanova pursued her. In each encounter 3, one after the other. Finally, the abbess, who she hinted she might give in, perhaps the next time, if he was nice to her. Was still unaware of all she inflamed his curiosity, what pleasure she would yield, he would be this, was taking a stroll one the first, he would tame her. The venom of desire penetrated my whole very hot day in the garden, all by herself, when she being so completely, he later wrote, that had she so wished it, she could came across Massetto have despoiled me of everything I possess. I would have beggared myself stretched out fast asleep in for one little kiss. This affair indeed proved his ruin, she humiliated him. The shade of an Armand Charpian had rightly gauged that Casanova's primary weakness was his create temptation, 237 need for conquest, to overcome challenge, to taste what no other man had tree. Too much riding by tasted. Beneath this was a kind of masochism, a pleasure in the pain a night had left him with very little strength for the woman could give him. Playing the impossible woman, enticing and then day's labors, and so they're frustrating him. She offered the ultimate temptation. What will often do the hele with his clothes trick is to give the target the sense that you are a challenge, a prize to be ruffled up in front by the one. In possessing you, they will get what no other has had. They may even win, leaving him all exposed. Finding herself get pain, but pain is close to pleasure, and offers its own temptations. Alone, the lady stood within the Old Testament. We read that David arose from his couch, and her eyes riveted to this was walking upon the roof of the king's house. And he saw from the spectacle, and she was seized by the same craving roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. The woman to which her young charges was Bathsheba. David summoned her, seduced her, supposedly, then had already succumbed. Seed to get rid of her husband, Uriah, in battle. In fact, however, it was so, having roused Masetto, she led him away to her Bathsheba, who had seduced David. She bathed on her roof at an hour room, where she kept him when she knew he would be standing on his balcony. After tempting a man for several days, thus she knew had a weakness for women, she played the coquette, forcing him provoking bitter complaints to come after her. This is the opportunity strategy. Give someone weak from the nuns over the fact that the handyman had chanced to have what they lust after by merely placing yourself within their suspended work in the reach, as if by accident. Temptation is often a matter of timing, of crossing garden. Before sending him the path of the weak at the right moment, giving them the opportunity to back to his own quarters, she repeatedly savored the surrender. One pleasure for which Bathsheba used her entire body as a law, but it is often more effective, had always reserved her to use only a part of the body, creating a fetish-like effect. Madame Ree most fierce disapproval, and from then on Camilla would let you glimpse her body beneath the sheer dresses she wore, demanded regular, but only briefly, when she took off her overgarment to dance. Men would supplementary allocations, leave that evening dreaming of what little they had seen. Empress Josephine, amounting to considerably more than her fair share, made a point of bearing her beautiful arms in public. Give the target only a part of you to fantasize about, thereby creating a constant temptation in. Giovanni Boccaccio, the Decameron, translated their mind. BYG, MCWILLIAM symbol, the apple in the Garden of Eden. The fruit looks deeply inviting, and you are not supposed to eat of it, it is forbidden. But that is precisely why you think of it day and night. You see it, but cannot have it. And the only way to get rid of this tempter tie-on is to yield and taste the fruit. 238. The Art of Seduction reversal. The reverse of temptation is security, or satisfaction, and both are fatal to seduction. If you cannot tempt someone out of their habitual comfort, you cannot seduce them. If you satisfy the desire you have awakened, the seduction is over. There is no reversal to temptation. Although some stages can be passed over, no seduction can proceed without some form of temptation. So it is always better to plan it carefully, tailoring it to the weakness and childishness in your particular target. Phase 2. Lead astray. Creating pleasure and confusion. Your victims are sufficiently intrigued and their desire for you is growing, but their attachment is weak and at any moment they could decide to turn back. The goal in this phase is to lead your victims so far astray, keeping them emotional and confused, giving them please sure, but making them want more, that retreat is no longer possible. Springing on them a pleasant surprise will make them see you as delightfully unpredictable, but will also keep them off balance. 9. Keep them in suspense. What comes next? The artful use of soft and pleasant words will intoxicate them and stimulate fantasies. 10. Use the demonic power of words to sow confusion. Aesthetic touches and pleasant little rituals will titillate their senses, distract their minds. 11. Pay attention to detail. Your greatest danger in this phase is the mere hint of routine or familiarity. You need to maintain some mystery, to keep a little distance, so that in your absence your victims become obsessed with you. 12. Poeticize your presence. They may realize they are falling for you, but they must never suspect how much of this has come from your manipulations. A well-timed display of your weakness, of how emotional you have become under their influence, will help cover your tracks. 13. Disarm through strategic weakness and vulnerability. To excite your victims and make them highly emotional, you must give them the feeling that they are actually living some of the fantasies you have stirred in their imagination. 14. Confuse desire and reality. By giving them only a part of the fantasy, you will keep them coming back for more. Focusing your attention on them so that the rest of the world fades away, even taking them on a trip, will lead them far astray. 15. Isolate your victim. There is no turning back. Keep them in suspense what comes next. The moment people feel they know what to expect from you, your spell on them is broken. More, you have ceded them power. The only way to lead the seduced along and keep the upper hand is to create suspense, a calculated surprise. People love a mystery, and this is the key to luring them further into your web. Behave in a way that leaves them wondering, what are you up to? Doing something they do not expect from you will give them a delightful sense of spontaneity. They will not be able to foresee what comes next. You are always one step ahead and in control. Give the victim a thrill with a sudden change of direction. The calculated surprise. In 1753, the 28-year-old Giovanni Casanova met a young girl named Caterina, with whom he fell in love. Her father knew what kind of man Casanova was, and to prevent some mishap, before he could marry her off, he sent her away to a convent on the Venetian island of Murano, where she was to remain for 4 years. Casanova, however, was not one to be daunted. He smuggled letters to count upon taking the Caterina. He began to attend Mass at the convent several times a week, French people by surprise. A bold deed upsets people's catching glimpses of her. The nuns began to talk among themselves. Who equanimity, and they are was this handsome young man who appeared so often. One morning, as dumbfounded by a great Casanova, leaving Mass, was about to board a gondola, a servant girl from Novelty. The convent passed by and dropped a letter at his feet. Thinking it might be Napoleon Bonaparte, from Caterina, he picked it up. It was indeed intended for him, but it was quoted in Emile Ludwig, Napoleon, translated by not from Caterina. Its author was a nun at the convent, who had noticed Eden and Cedar Paul him on his many visits and wanted to make his acquaintance. Was he interested? If so, he should come to the convent's parlor at a particular time, when the nun would be receiving a visitor from the outside world, a friend, the first care of any dandy of hers who was a countess. He could stand at a distance, observe her, and is to never do what one decide whether she was to his liking. Expects them to do, to always go beyond. Casanova was most intrigued by the letter. Its style was dignified, but the unexpected can be there was something naughty about it as well, particularly from a nun. He nothing more than a hat to find out more. At the appointed day and time, he stood to the side gesture, but a gesture that is totally uncommon. In the convent parlor, and saw an elegantly dressed woman talking with her Alcibiades, cut off the tail of nun seated behind a grating. He heard the nun's name mentioned, and was his dog in order to surprise astonished. It was Mathilde M., a well-known Venetian in her early 20s. When he saw the looks on his friends as they ties, whose decision to enter a convent had surprised the whole city, but gazed upon the mutilated, what astonished him most was that beneath her nun's habit, he could see animal, he said, that she was a beautiful young woman, particularly in her eyes, which were as precisely what I wanted to happen, as long as they are brilliant blue. Perhaps she needed a favor done, and intended that he Athenians gossip about would serve as her cat's paw. This, they will not say his curiosity got the better of him. A few days later, he returned to the anything worse about me convent and asked to see her. As he waited for her, his heart was beating. Attracting attention is not the only goal of a mile a minute. He did not know what to expect. She finally appeared and dandy, he wants to hold it, sat down behind the grating. They were alone in the room, and she said by unexpected, even that she could arrange for them to have supper together at a little villa. Ridiculous means. After Alcibiades, how many nearby? Casanova was delighted, but wondered what kind of nun he was. Apprentice dandies cut off dealing with. Anne, have you no lover but me? He asked. I have the tails of their dogs. The 244, The Art of Seduction, Baron of St. Crick, for friend, who is also absolutely my master, she replied. It is to him I owe example, with his ice cream my wealth. She asked if he had a lover. Yes, he replied. She then said in a boots, one very hot day, he mysterious tone, I warn you that if you once allow me to take her place in ordered at Tortoni's 2 ice creams, the vanilla served your heart, no power on earth can tear me from it. She then gave him the in his right boot, the key to the villa, and told him to meet her there in 2 nights. He kissed her strawberry in his left through the grating and left in a daze. I passed the next 2 days in a state boot. The Count Saint-Germain loved to a feverish impatience, he wrote, which prevented me from sleeping or bring his friends to the eating. Over and above birth, beauty, and wit, my new conquest possessed theatre, in his voluptuous and additional charm, she was forbidden fruit. I was about to become a rival carriage lined in pink satin of the church. He imagined her in her habit, and with her shaven head. And drawn by 2 black horses with enormous tails, he arrived at the villa at the appointed hour. Mathilde was waiting for he asked his friends in that hymn. To his surprise, she wore an elegant dress, and somehow she had inimitable tone of his. Avoided having her head shaved, for her hair was in a magnificent chignon. Which piece of entertainment did you wish? Casanova began to kiss her. She resisted, but only slightly, and then pulled to see vaudeville, the back, saying a meal was ready for them. Over dinner she filled in a few variety show, the Palais more of the gaps. Her money allowed her to bribe certain people. So that Royal Theatre. I took the liberty of purchasing a box, she could escape from the convent every so often. She had mentioned for all 3 of them Casanova to her friend and master, and he had approved their liaison. He once the choice was made, must be old. Casanova asked. No, she replied, a glint in her eye, he is in his with a look of great 40s, and quite handsome. After supper, a bell rang, her signal to hurry disdain, he would take the unused tickets, roll them back to the convent, or she would be caught. She changed back into her up, and used them to light habit and left. His cigar. A beautiful vista now seemed to stretch before Casanova, of months, Maudd Bellaroche, spent in the villa with this delightful creature, all of it courtesy of the mice du dandy au playboy Iou's master, who paid for it all. He soon returned to the convent to arrange the next meeting. They would rendezvous in a square in Venice, then retire to the villa. At the appointed time and place, Casanova saw her while Shahzaman sat at man approach him. Fearing it was her mysterious friend, or some other one of the widow's man sent to kill him, he recoiled. The man circled behind him, then came overlooking the king's garden. He saw a door open up close. It was Mathilde, wearing a mask and men's clothes. She laughed at in the palace, through the fright she had given him. What a devilish nun! He had to admit that which came 20 slave dressed as a man she excited him even more. Girls and 20 Negroes. In their midst was his Casanova began to suspect that all was not as it seemed. For one, he brother's king found a collection of libertine novels and pamphlets in Mathilde's house. Shahriar's queen, then she made blasphemous comments, for example about the joy they woman of surpassing beauty. They made their would have together during Lent, mortifying their flesh. Now she re-way to the fountain, where forayed to her mysterious friend as her lover. A plan evolved in his mind to they all undressed, and sat take her away from this man, and from the convent, eloping with her and on the grass. The king's wife then called out, possessing her himself. Come Masoud, and a few days later he received a letter from her, in which she made a con there promptly came to her Phession, during one of their more passionate trysts at the villa, her lover black slave, who mounted had hidden in a closet, watching the whole thing. The lover, she told him, her after smothering her with embraces and kisses, was the French ambassador to Venice, and Casanova had impressed him. So also did the Negroes. Casanova was not one to be fooled with like this, yet the next day he was with the slave girls, reveling back at the convent, submissively arranging for another tryst. This time, she together till the approach of night. An so showed up at the hour they had named, and he embraced her, only to keep them in suspense. What comes next? 245 find that he was embracing Caterina, dressed up in Mathilde's clothes. Shah-Zaman related to, his Mathilde had befriended Caterina, and learned her story. Apparently taking brother King Shahryar, all that he had seen in the pity on her, she had arranged it so that Caterina could leave the convent for King's Garden that day, the evening, and meet up with Casanova. Only a few months before upon this Shahryar Casanova had been in love with this girl, but he had forgotten about her. Announced his intention to compare to the ingenious Mathilde, Caterina was a simpering boor. He set forth on another expedition. The troops could not conceal his disappointment. He burned to see Mathilde. Went out of the city with Casanova, was angry at the trick Mathilde had played. But a few days the tenth, and King later, when he saw her again, all was forgiven. As she had predicted, during Shahryar followed them. And after he had stayed at their first interview, her power over him was complete. He had become her while in the camp, he gave slave, addicted to her whims, and to the dangerous pleasures she offered. Orders to his slaves that no who knows what rash act he might have committed on her behalf had one was to be admitted to the king's tent. He then, their affair not being cut short by circumstance, disguised himself and returned unnoticed to the palace, where his brother was waiting for him. The interpretation. Casanova was almost always in control in his seductions. Both sat at one of the he was the one who led, taking his victim on a trip to an unknown dusty windows overlooking the nation, luring her into his web. In all of his memoirs the story of Mathilde Garden, and when they had is the only seduction, in which the tables are happily turned. He is the said been there a short time, the queen and her women ducked, the bewildered victim appeared with the black. What made Casanova Mathilde's slave was the same tactic, he had used slaves, and behaved as on countless girls, the irresistible law of being led by another person, the Shah-Zaman had described. As soon thrill of being surprised, the power of mystery. Each time he left Mathilde as they entered the palace, his head was spinning with questions. Her ability to go on surprising him King Shahryar, kept her always in his mind, deepening her spell and blotting Caterina out. Wife to death, together with her women and the black, each surprise was carefully calculated for the effect it would produce. The slaves. Thenceforth he first unexpected letter piqued his curiosity, as did that first sight of her in made it his custom to take the waiting room. Suddenly seeing her dressed as an elegant woman stirred a virgin in marriage to his intense desire. Then seeing her dressed as a man intensified the excitingly bed each night, and kill her the next morning. This he transgressive nature of their liaison. The surprises put him off balance, yet continued to do for three left him quivering with anticipation of the next one. Even in unpleasant years, until a clamor rose surprise, such as the encounter with Caterina that Mathilde had set up, kept among the people, some of whom fled the country with him emotional and weak. Meeting the somewhat bland Caterina at that their daughters. Now the moment only made him long that much more for Mathilde. Vizier had 2 daughters. In seduction, you need to create constant tension and suspense. Afield the elder was called Shahrazad, and the that with you nothing is predictable. Do not think of this as a painful younger Dunyazad. Challenge. You are creating drama in real life, so pour your creative energies. Shahrazad possessed many into it. Have some fun. There are all kinds of calculated surprises you can accomplishments, and was versed in the wisdom of the spring on your victims. sending a letter from out of the blue, showing up poets and the legends of unexpectedly, taking them to a place they have never been. But best of all, ancient kings. That day are surprises that reveal something new about your character. This needs to Shahrazad noticed her be set up. In those first few weeks, your targets will tend to make certain fathers anxiety, and asked him what it was that snapped judgments about you, based on appearances. Perhaps they see you as troubled him. When the a bit shy, practical, puritanical. You know that this is not the real you, but it Vizier told her of his is how you act in social situations. Let them, however, have these impress predicament, she said. Give me in marriage to scions, and in fact accentuate them a little, without overacting. For instance, 246, The Art of Seduction. This king. Either I shall die seem a little more reserved than usual. Now you have room to suddenly and be a ransom for the surprise them with some bold or poetic or naughty action. Once they have daughters of Moslems, or changed their minds about you, surprise them again, as Matilde did with Live, and be the cause of their deliverance. He Casanova, first a nun who wants an affair, then a libertine, then a seduc earnestly pleaded with her tress with a sadistic streak. As they strain to figure you out, they will be against such a hazard, but thinking about you all of the time, and will want to know more about you. Shahrazad was resolved, and would not yield to her. Their curiosity will lead them further into your web, until it is too late for father's entreaties them to turn back. So the Vizier arrayed his daughter in bridal garments. This is always the law for the interesting. If one just and decked her with jewels and made ready to knows how to surprise, one always wins the game. The En announced Shahrazad's urgi of the person involved is temporarily suspended. One wedding to the king makes it impossible for her to act. Before saying farewell to her sister, Shahrazad gave Soren Kierkegaard her these instructions: when I am received by the king, I shall send for you. Then when the king keys to seduction has finished his act with me, you must say, tell me, my sister, some tale of marvel to beguile the Akhild is usually a willful, stubborn creature, who will deliberately do the opposite of what we ask. But there is one scenario in which chill night. Then I will tell you Dren will happily give up their usual willfulness, when they are promised a tale which, if Allah wills, surprise. Perhaps it is a present hidden in a box, a game with an unforeseen shall be the means of our able ending, a journey with an unknown destination, a suspenseful story deliverance. The Vizier went with his daughter to with a surprise finish. In those moments when children are waiting for the king, and when the surprise, their willpower is suspended, they are in your thrall for as long as king had taken the maiden you dangle possibility before them. This childish habit is buried deep Shahrazad to his chamber and had lain with her, she within us, and is the source of an elemental human pleasure, being led by a wept and said, I have a person who knows where they are going, and who takes us on a journey. Young sister to whom maybe our joy in being carried along involves a buried memory of being wished to bid farewell. Literally carried, by a parent, when we are small. The king sent for Dunyazad. When we get a similar thrill when we watch a movie or read a thriller, we are arrived. She threw her arms in the hands of a director, or author who is leading us along, taking us around her sister's neck, through twists and turns. We stay in our seats, we turn the pages, happily, and seated herself by her side. Then Dunyazad enslaved by the suspense. It is the pleasure a woman has in being led by a said to Shahrazad, tell confident dancer, letting go of any defensiveness she may feel and letting us, my sister, a tale of another person do the work. Falling in love involves anticipation, we are marvel, so that the night may pass pleasantly. About to head off in a new direction, enter a new life, where everything gladly, she answered, will be strange. The seduced wants to be led, to be carried along like a, if the king permits. Child. If you are predictable, the charm wears off, everyday life is and the king, who was dictable. In the Arabian tales from the 1001 Nights, each night troubled with sleeplessness, eagerly listened to the tale. King Shahryar takes a virgin as his wife, then kills her the following morn. Of Shahrazad, once uponing. One such virgin, Shahrazad, manages to escape this fate by telling the time, in the city of King, a story that can only be completed the following day. She does this. Basra, there lived a prosperous tailor who was night after night, keeping the king in constant suspense. When one story fond of sport and finishes, she quickly starts up another. She does this for nearly 3 years, merriment. Nearly until the king finally decides to spare her life. You are like Shahrazad, with keep them in suspense. What comes next? 247 out new stories, without a feeling of anticipation, your seduction will die. 3 years pass. Now keep stoking the fires night after night. Your targets must never know. During this time Shahrazad had borne king. What's coming next? What surprises you have in store for them? As with Shahryar, 3 sus. On King Shahryar, they will be under your control for as long as you can keep the 1001st them guessing. Night, when she had ended the tale of Maruf, she in 1765, Casanova met a young Italian countess, named Clementina Rose, and kissed the ground, who lived with her 2 sisters in a chateau. Clementina loved to read, and before him, saying, great had little interest in the men who swarmed around her. For their sake I implore. Clementina had fallen hopelessly in love with Casanova. You to spare my life. For if the reason was simple, surprise creates a moment when people's you destroy the mother of these infants, they will find fences come down and new emotions can rush in. If the surprise is pleaser, none among women to love able, the seductive poison enters their veins without their realizing it. Any them as I would. The sudden event has a similar effect, striking directly at our emotions. Before King embraced his 3 we get defensive. Rakes know this power well. Sus, and his eyes filled with tears as he answered, a young married woman in the court of Louis XV, in 18th I swear by Allah, century France, noticed a handsome young courtier watching her, first at Shahrazad, that you were the opera, then in church. Making inquiries, she found it was the Duc de already pardoned before the coming of these children. Richelieu, the most notorious rake in France. No woman was safe from I loved you because I this man, she was warned, he was impossible to resist, and she should avoid found you chaste and him at all costs. Nonsense, she replied, she was happily married. He could tender, wise and eloquent. May Allah bless you, not possibly seduce her. Seeing him again, she laughed at his persistence. And bless your father, and he would disguise himself as a beggar and approach her in the park, or his mother, your ancestors' coach would suddenly come alongside hers. He was never aggressive, and all your descendants seemed harmless enough. She let him talk to her at court. He was charming, Shahrazad, this 1001st night, and witty, and even asked to meet her husband. Is brighter for us than the weeks past, and the woman realized she had made a mistake. She the day looked forward to seeing the Marquis. She had let down her guard. This, Tales from the Thousand had to stop. Now she started avoiding him, and he seemed to respect her, and one night's, translated by Dorwood feelings, he stopped bothering her. Then one day, weeks later, she was at the country manor of a friend when the Marquis suddenly appeared. She blushed, trembled, walked away, but his unexpected appearance had caught her unawares. It had pushed her over the edge. A few days later, she became another of Richelieu's victims. Of course he had set the whole thing up, including the supposed surprise encounter. Not only does suddenness create a seductive jolt, it conceals manipula. 248 The Art of Seduction tie-ins. Appear somewhere unexpectedly, say or do something sudden, and people will not have time to figure out that your move was calculated. Take them to some new place as if it only just occurred to you, suddenly reveal some secret. Made emotionally vulnerable, they will be too bewildered to see through you. Anything that happens suddenly seems natural, and anything that seems natural has a seductive charm. Only months after arriving in Paris in 1926, Josephine Baker had completely charmed and seduced the French public with her wild dancing. But less than a year later, she could feel their interest wane. Since childhood, she had hated feeling out of control of her life. Why be at the mercy of the fickle public? She left Paris and returned a year later, her manner completely altered. Now she played the part of an elegant Frenchwoman, who happened to be an ingenious dancer and performer. The French fell in love again, the power was back on her side. If you are in the public eye, you must learn from this trick of surprise. People are bored, not only with their own lives, but with people who are meant to keep them from being bored. The minute they feel they can predict your next step, they will eat you alive. The artist Andy Warhol kept moving from incarnation to incarnation, and no one could predict the next one. Artist, filmmaker, society man. Always keep a surprise up your sleeve. To keep the public's attention, keep them guessing. Let the moralists accuse you of insincerity, of having no core or center. They are actually jealous of the freedom and playfulness you reveal in your public persona. Finally, you might think it wiser to present yourself as someone reliable, not given to caprice. If so, you are in fact merely timid. It takes courage and effort to mount a seduction. Reliability is fine for drawing people in, but stay reliable and you stay a bore. Dogs are reliable, a seducer is not. If, on the other hand, you prefer to improvise, imagining that any kind of planning or calculation is antithetical to the spirit of surprise, you are making a grave mistake. Constant improvisation simply means you are lazy and thinking only about yourself. What often seduces a person is the feeling that you have expended effort on their behalf. You do not need to trumpet this too loudly, but make it clear in the gifts you make, the little journeys you plan, the little teases you lure people with. Little efforts like these will be more than amply rewarded by the conquest of the heart and willpower of the seduced. Symbol, the roller coaster. The car rises slowly to the top, then suddenly hurtles you into space, whips you to the side, throws you upside down, in every possible direction. The riders laugh and scream. What thrills them is to let go, to grant control to someone else, who propels them in unexpected directions. What new thrill awaits them around the next corner? Keep them in suspense. What comes next? 249 Reversal surprise can be unsurprising if you keep doing the same thing again and again. Jiang Qing would try to surprise her husband Mao Zedong with sudden changes of mood, from harshness to kindness and back. At first he was captivated. He loved the feeling of never knowing what was coming. But it went on for years, and was always the same. Soon, Madame Mao's supposedly unpredictable mood swings just annoyed him. You need to vary the method of your surprises. When Madame de Pompadour was the lover of the inveterately bored King Louis XV, she made each surprise different. A new amusement, a new game, a new fashion, a new mood. He could never predict what would come next, and while he waited for the next surprise, his willpower was temporarily suspended. No man was ever more of a slave to a woman than was Louis to Madame de Pompadour. When you change direction, make the new direction truly new. Use the demonic power of words to sow confusion. It is hard to make people listen. They are consumed with their own thoughts and desires, and have little time for yours. The trick to making them listen is to say what they want to hear, to fill their ears with whatever is pleasant to them. This is the essence of seductive language. Inflame people's emotions with loaded phrases, flatter them, comfort their insecurities, envelop them in fantasies, sweet words, and promises, and not only will they listen to you, they will lose their will to resist you. Keep your language vague, letting them read into it what they want. Use writing to stir up fantasies, and to create an idealized portrait of yourself. Seductive oratory. On May 13, 1958, right-wing Frenchmen and their sympathizers in the army seized control of Algeria, which was then a French colony. They had been afraid that France's socialist government would grant Algeria its independence. Now, with Algeria under their control, they threatened to take over all of France. Civil war seemed imminent. At this dire moment, all eyes turned to General Charles de Gaulle, the World War II hero, who had played a crucial role in liberating France from after Operation Sedition. We are being treated to the Nazis. For the last 10 years de Gaulle had stayed away from politics, this Operation Seduction. Gusted with the infighting among the various parties. He remained very, Maurice Kriegel Puller, and was generally seen as the one man who could unite the country, Valremont on Charles de. But he was also a conservative, and the right-wingers felt certain that if he Gaulle, shortly after The General assumed power came to power, he would support their cause. Days after the May 13 coup, the French government, the Fourth Republic, collapsed, and the Parliament called on de Gaulle to help form a new government. The Fifth Republic, my mistress, staged a locklick. He asked for and was granted full powers for 4 months. On June 4, I went back 2 days after becoming the head of government. De Gaulle flew to Algeria. Verses and compliments, the French colonials were ecstatic. It was their coup that had indirectly my natural weapons. Soft brought de Gaulle to power. Surely, they imagined, he was coming to thank words remove harsh door chains. There's magic them, and to reassure them that Algeria would remain French. When he in poetry, its power can arrived in Algiers, thousands of people filled the city's main plaza. The pull down the bloody mood was extremely festive. There were banners, music, and endless chants. Moon, turn bark the sun, make serpents burst of Algerie Française, the French colonial slogan. Suddenly de Gaulle appeared asunder or rivers flow paired on a balcony overlooking the plaza. The crowd went wild. The upstream doors are no general, an extremely tall man, raised his arms above his head, and the match for such spellbinding, the toughest chanting doubled in volume. The crowd was begging him to join in. In locks can be opusessimid. Stead he lowered his arms until silence fell, then opened them wide, and by its charms. But epics are slowly intoned, in his deep voice, Je vous ai compris, I have understood dead loss for me. I'll get you. There was a moment of quiet, and then, as his words sank in, a deaf nowhere with swift-footed Achilles, or with either of Ening Raw, he understood them. That was all they needed to hear. Atreus' sons. Old Watts. De Gaulle proceeded to talk of the greatness of France. More cheers. His name wasting 20, he promised there would be new elections. And with those elected years on war and travel. Poor Hector dragged in the sensitives, we will see how to do the rest. Yes, a new government, just what dust, no good. But the crowd wanted more cheers. He would find the place for Algeria, in lavish fine words on some the French ensemble. There must be total discipline, without qualifica, young girls profile and sooner or later shall tender tie on, and without conditions, who could argue with that? He closed with herself as the fee, and a loud call, Vive la République. Vive la France. The emotional slogan that ample reward for your 254, the Art of Seduction labors. So farewell, heroic had been the rallying cry in the fight against the Nazis. Everyone shouted it, figures of legend, the back. In the next few days de Gaulle made similar speeches around Algeria, quid pro quo you offer to equally delirious crowds. Won't tempt me. A bevy of beauties all swooning only after de Gaulle had returned to France, did the words of his Over My Love songs, that speeches sink in, not once had he promised to keep Algeria French. In fact what I want. He had hinted that he might give the Arabs the vote, and might grant an, Ovid, the Amores, amnesty to the Algerian rebels who had been fighting to force the French. Translated by Peter Greene from the country. Somehow, in the excitement his words had created, the colonists had failed to focus on what they had actually meant. De Gaulle had duped them. And indeed, in the months to come, he worked to grant, when she has received Algeria its independence, a task he finally accomplished in 1962. Later, when its sweet poison has entered her blood, then a word is sufficient to wake her love interpretation. De Gaulle cared little about an old French colony and burst forth. About what it symbolized to some French people. Nor did he have any personal presence will prevent ecstasy. If I am sympathy for anyone who fomented civil war. His one concern was to present only in a letter, make France a modern power. And so, when he went to Algiers, he had a then she can easily cope long-term plan, weaken the right-wingers by getting them to fight among with me, to some extent, she mistakes me for more themselves, and work toward Algerian independence. His short-term goal universal creature, who had to be to diffuse the tension, and by himself some time. He would not dwells in her love. Then, lie to the colonials by saying he supported their cause. That would cause too, in a letter one can more readily have free rein, trouble back home. Instead he would beguile them with seductive oratory, in a letter I can throw intoxicate them with words. His famous, I have understood you, could myself at her feet in superb easily have meant, I understand what a danger you represent. But a Juby fashion, etc. Something larnt crowd expecting his support read it the way they wanted. To keep that would easily seem like nonsense if I did it in them at a fever pitch. De Gaulle made emotional references to the French person and the illusion resistance during World War II, for example, and to the need for this I would be lost. On Pline, a word with great appeal to right-wingers. He filled their ears with the whole, letters are and will continue to be a promises, a new government, a glorious future. He got them to chant, priceless means of creating an emotional bond. He spoke with dramatic pitch, and quivering an impression on a young emotion. His words created a kind of delirium. Girl, the dead letter of writing often has much de Gaulle was not trying to express his feelings, or speak the truth. He more influenced than there was trying to produce an effect. This is the key to seductive oratory. Living word. A letter is a whether you are talking to a single individual, or to a crowd. Try a little secretive communication. One is master of the pyramid. Rein in your desire to speak your mind. Before you open your situation, feels no pressure mouth, ask yourself a question. What can I say that will have the most from anyone's actual pleasant effect on my listeners? Often this entails flattering their egos, presence, and I do believe assuaging their insecurities, giving them vague hopes for the future. Simple young girl would prefer to be alone with her ideal. The rising with their travails, I have understood you. Start off with some, Sren Kierkegaard, thing pleasant and everything to come will be easy. People's defenses will seducer's diary, go down. They will grow amenable, open to suggestion. Think of your translated by Howard V. Words as an intoxicating drug that will make people emotional and HONGANDEDNAH fused. Keep your language vague and ambiguous, letting your listeners fill in the gaps with their fantasies and imaginings. Instead of tuning you out, getting irritated or defensive, being impatient for you to shut up, they will be pliant, happy with your sweet-sounding words. Use the demonic power of words to sow confusion. 255 Seductive writing. Let wax pave the way for you. Spread out on smooth tablets. Let wax go. Before one spring afternoon in the late 1830s, in a street in Copenhagen, as witness to your mind, man named Johannes caught a glimpse of a beautiful young girl. Bring her your flattering absorbed yet delightfully innocent, she fascinated him, and he followed her, words that aped her from a distance, and found out where she lived. Over the next few weeks lover and remember, whoever you are, to throw he made inquiries and found out more about her. Her name was Cordelia in some good entreaties. Wall, and she lived with her aunt. The two led a quiet existence. Cordelia entreaties are what made liked to read, and to be alone. Seducing young girls was Johannes's specialty. Achilles give back / Hector's body to Priam, but Cordelia would be a catch. She had already turned down several eligible, even an angry god / is suitors. Moved by the voice of Johannes, imagined that Cordelia might hunger for something more. Prayer. Make promises, what's the harm in / out of life, something grand, something resembling the books she had promising. Here's where read and the daydreams that presumably filled her solitude. He arranged anyone can play rich. An introduction, and began to frequent her house, accompanied by a friend / a persuasive letters / the thing to lead off with, of his named Edward. This young man had his own thoughts of court explore her mind, / in Cordelia, but he was awkward and strained to please her. Johannes, reconnoiter the landscape. On the other hand, virtually ignored her, instead befriending her aunt. A message scratched on, and they would talk about the most banal things, farm life, whatever was in apple / betrayed Sedeep. She was snared by her own the news. Occasionally, Johannes would veer off into a more philosophical words. / my advice, then, discussion, for he had noticed, out of the corner of his eye, that on these young men of Rome, is to occasions Cordelia would listen to him closely, while still pretending to learn the noble / advocate's arts, and not only to let you tend to Edward. Defend / some trembling. This went on for several weeks. Johannes and Cordelia barely spoke. Client, a woman, no less, but he could tell that he intrigued her, and that Edward irritated her to no than the populace, / elite senator, or grave judge, / end. One morning, knowing her aunt was out, he visited their house. It will surrender to was the first time he and Cordelia had been alone together. As dryly and eloquence. Nevertheless, politely as possible, he proceeded to propose to her. Needless to say, she was dissemble / your powers, avoid long words, / don't shocked and flustered. A man who had shown not the slightest interest in look too highbrow. Who has suddenly wanted to marry her. She was so surprised that she referred, but a mindless ninny / the matter to her aunt, who, as Johannes had expected, gave her approval. Declaims to his mistress. Had Cordelia resisted, her aunt would have respected her wishes, but she in overlettered style / repels girls as often as not. Did not use ordinary language, / on the outside, everything had changed. The couple were engaged. Joe, familiar yet coaxing Honest, now came to the house alone, sat with Cordelia, held her hand, words, as though / you were there, in her presence. Talked with her. But inwardly he made sure things were the same. If she refuses your letter, / mained distant and polite. He would sometimes warm up, particularly sends it back unread, when talking about literature, Cordelia's favorite subject, but at a certain point he always went back to more mundane matters. He knew this frus, Ovid, the art of love. Traited Cordelia, who had expected that now he would be different. Yet translated by Peter Greene. Even when they went out together, he took her to formal socials arranged for engaged couples. How conventional. Was this what love and marriage were supposed to be about? These prematurely aged people talking about houses and their own drab futures. Cordelia, who was shy at the best of times, asked Johannes to stop dragging her to these affairs. The battlefield was prepared. Cordelia was confused and anxious. 256 The Art of Seduction. Therefore, the person who then, a few weeks after their engagement, Johannes sent her a letter. Here is unable to write letters, he described the state of his soul, and his certainty that he loved her. He in notes never becomes a spoken metaphor, suggesting that he had been waiting for years, lantern in dangerous seducer. Hand, for Cordelia's appearance, metaphor melted into reality, back and, Soren Kierkegaard, either or, translated by 4th. The style was poetic, the words glowed with desire, but the whole Howard v. Hong was delightfully ambiguous. Cordelia could reread the letter 10 times and Hong without being sure what it said. The next day Johannes received a response. The writing was simple and straightforward, but full of sentiment. His letter had made her so happy, Cordelia wrote, and she had not imagined this side standing on a crag to his character. He replied by writing that he had changed. He did not say Olympus / gold-throned how or why, but the implication was that it was because of her. Hera saw her brother, / now his letters came almost daily. They were mostly of the same who was her husband's brother too, / busy on the length, in a poetic style that had a touch of madness to it, as if he were in fields of human glory, / toxicated with love. He talked of Greek myth, comparing Cordelia to and her heart sang. Then Nymph himself, to a river that fell in love with a maiden. His soul, she saw Zeus / sitting on the topmost peak of Ida / said, merely reflected back her image. She was all he could see or think of. And was filled with. Meanwhile he detected changes in Cordelia. Her letters became more resentment. Cow-eyed etic, less restrained. Without realizing it she repeated his ideas, imitating his hero / mused for a while on how to trick / the mind style, and his imagery, as if they were her own. Also, when they saw each of Zeus' aegis holder, / other in person, she was nervous. He made a point of remaining the same, and the plan that seemed aloof and regal, but he could tell that she saw him differently, sensing best to her / was to make depths in him that she could not fathom. In public she hung on his every herself up and go to Ida, / seduce him, and then shed word. She must have memorized his letters, for she referred to them on his eyelids / and Stantley in their talks. It was a secret life they shared. When she held his cunning mind asleep hand, she did so more tightly than before. Her eyes expressed an imper gentle and warm. / when everything was tense, as if she were hoping that at any moment he would do something perfect, she stepped / out bold of her room and called Johannes, made his letters shorter, but more numerous, sometimes Aphrodite / and had a word with her in private / sending several in one day. The imagery became more physical and more my dear child, will you suggestive, the style more disjointed, as if he could barely organize his do something for me / I thoughts. Sometimes he sent a note of just a sentence or two. Once, at a wonder, or will you refuse, party at Cordelia's house, he dropped such a note into her knitting basket angry, because / I favor the Greeks, and knew the and watched as she ran away to read it, her face flushed. In her letters he Trojans / and Zeus saw signs of emotion and turmoil. Echoing a sentiment he had hinted at in daughter Aphrodite an earlier letter, she wrote that she hated the whole engagement business. Replied / goddess revered as Cronus's daughter, / it was so beneath their love. Speak your mind. Tell me everything was ready. Soon she would be his, the way he wanted it. What you want / and she would break off the engagement. A rendezvous in the country would oblige you if I possibly can. / and Hera would be simple to arrange, in fact she would be the one to propose it. This every intention to deceive / would be his most skillful seduction. Give me now the sex and desire / you use to subdue immortals and humans. / an interpretation. Johannes and Cordelia are characters in the loosely auto-Aphrodite, who loved to biographical novel The Seducer's Diary, 1843, by the Danish philosopher Smile / How Could I, or Søren Kierkegaard. Johannes is a most experienced seducer, who specializes would I refuse someone / who sleeps in the anus of in working on his victim's mind. This is precisely where Cordelia's previous used the demonic power of words to sow confusion. 257 suitors have failed. They have begun by imposing themselves. A common almighty Zeus. / and mistake. We think that by being persistent, by overwhelming our targets with that she unbound from her breast / and ornate with romantic attention, we are convincing them of our affection. Instead / inlaid with magical, we are convincing them of our impatience and insecurity. Aggressive aton charms. / sex is in it, and tie-on is not flattering, because it is not personalized. It is unbridled libido at desire, and seductive / work, the target sees through it. Johannes is too clever to begin so obvious sweet talk, that fools even the wise. / Hera was usually. Instead, he takes a step back, intriguing Cordelia by acting a little fast, approaching Gargarus, cold, and carefully creating the impression of a formal, somewhat secretive / Ida's highest peak, when man. Only then does he surprise her with his first letter. Obviously there is Zeus saw her. / and when he saw her, lust enveloped more to him than she has thought, and once she has come to believe this, him, / just as it had her imagination runs rampant. Now he can intoxicate her with his letters, first time they made love, / creating a presence that haunts her like a ghost. His words, with their slipping off to bed behind their parents' backs. / he ages and poetic references, are constantly in her mind. And this is the ulti stood close to her and said, mate seduction, to possess her mind before moving to conquer her body. / Hera, why have you left the story of Johannes, shows what a weapon in a seducer's army are Olympus. / and where are your horses and chariot? / letter can be. But it is important to learn how to incorporate letters in se and hera, with every duction. It is best not to begin your correspondence until at least several intention to deceive / I'm weeks after your initial contact. Let your victims get an impression of you. Off to visit the ends of the you seem intriguing, yet you show no particular interest in them. When Earth / and Father Ocean and Mother Tessis / who you sense that they are thinking about you, that is the time to hit them nursed and doted on me in with your first letter. Any desire you express for them will come as a sir their house. / and prize. Their vanity will be tickled and they will want more. Now make your Zeus, clouds scudding about him / you can go letters frequent, in fact more frequent than your personal appearances. This their later just as well. / will give them the time and space to idealize you, which would be more let's get in bed now Amy difficult if you were always in their face. After they have fallen under your make love. / no goddess or woman has ever / made spell, you can always take a step back, making the letters fewer, let them me feel so overwhelmed think you are losing interest, and they will be hungry for more. With lust. / I've never designed your letters as homages to your targets. Make everything you loved anyone as I love you now, / never been in the right come back to them, as if they were all you could think about. The grip of desire so sweet. / delirious effect. If you tell an anecdote, make it somehow relate to them. And Hera, with every your correspondence is a kind of mirror you are holding up to them, they intention to deceive / what a thing to say, might get to see themselves reflected through your desire. If for some reason they awesome lord / they do not like you, write to them as if they did. Remember, the tone of your thought of us lying down letters is what will get under their skin. If your language is elevated, poetic, here on Ida / Amy making creative in its praise, it will infect them despite themselves. Never argue, love outdoors in broad daylight. / what if one of never defend yourself, never accuse them of being heartless. That would the immortals saw us / ruin the spell. Asleep, and went to all the a letter can suggest emotion by seeming disordered, rambling from one other god's / aud told them. I could never get up subject to another. Clearly it is hard for you to think. Your love has un / and go back home. It hinged you. Disordered thoughts are exciting thoughts. Do not waste time would be shameful. / But if on real information, focus on feelings and sensations, using expressions that you really do want to do this, there is the bedroom are ripe with connotation. Plant ideas by dropping hints, writing Suggs your dear son Hephaestus Tively without explaining yourself. Never lecture, never seem intellectual or built for you, with good superior, you will only make yourself pompous, which is deadly. Far bet solid doors. Let's go to speak colloquially, though with a poetic edge to lift the language there and lie down, since you're in the mood. Above the commonplace. Do not become sentimental. It is tiring, and 258 The Art of Seduction and Zeus, who masses the direct. Better to suggest the effect your target has on you than to gush clouds, replied Hero, about how you feel. Stay vague and ambiguous, allowing the reader the don't worry about any god space to imagine and fantasize. The goal of your writing is not to X or man seeing us. I'll enfold you in a cloud, so press yourself, but to create emotion in the reader, spreading confusion and dense and golden not desire. Even alios could spy on you will know that your letters are having the proper effect when you're us, and his light is the sharpest vision there is. Targets come to mirror your thoughts, repeating words you wrote, whether in their own letters or in person. This is the time to move to the more, Homer, the Iliad. Translated by Stanley physical and erotic. Use language that quivers with sexual connotation, or